It all begins when creatures were drawn in by humanity's dark miasma. They started emerging on Earth, eventually becoming known as demons. The power they possessed was insanely massive. Because of that, they claimed countless lives over the centuries. But the gods decided not to leave humanity to suffer their fate alone. To help them fight back, they granted humans manifestation blades, weapons imbued with divine power. Those who wielded these weapons came to be known as demon slayers, protecting everyone's peace, and standing at the absolute pinnacle of all warriors fighting these creatures is the one hailed as the strongest existence and the true symbol of the era. He is known to everyone as the Sword Emperor. Led by the Sword Emperor of each generation, the Slayers fought relentlessly to save humanity. Fast forward to the present day, where the current Emperor remarks that a real warrior can be spotted with just a single glance on the other end of the line. Someone begs him to hurry up and choose a candidate for the Academy, but he thinks everyone is way too average. He explains that he is looking for someone with a massive ego, since those are the only ones who never break, almost looking like a villain. While a commercial featuring him plays on screen, the person on the phone loses their patience and decides to wait until tomorrow. The person begs him to make a decision quickly and pick someone already. The current Sword Emperor, Kaname Akuta, stays lost in thought about what he should do next. The scene then shifts to an ordinary high school in the middle of the city. A boy in a rush realizes he is going to be late and decides to use his powers to run faster. He activates a whirlwind kick technique and ends up running over another student on the way. The poor guy who got hit ends up falling headfirst into a pile of trash bags. This is 17-year-old Haruto Kamakiri who complains, telling the jerk to run on the street instead. Haruto stands up, while in the background a mother says goodbye to a little girl named Rika, telling her to be careful. Some mothers comment that they are taking turns escorting their kids because of recent kidnappings targeting blade wielders. Rika shows off the glowing mark on her wrist, leaving one of the women impressed to see a revelation stigma up close. She mentions that it is a great idea to escort her. Since the little girl is practically a national treasure now, those who are chosen by the gods receive a revelation and earn a special blade. To receive this revelation, a person must possess spiritual energy, though there are always exceptions. A woman smirks, commenting on the existence of those very rare exceptions. Haruto walks along while listening to people whispering that he does not have even a single drop of spiritual energy. They keep gossiping that his parents passed away in an accident and that his relatives suffered a lot too. After all, spiritual energy acts like a beacon for the gods to locate their chosen ones. Haruto thinks to himself that he knows all too well the next nasty line he is about to hear. The woman keeps talking, saying that this is exactly why everyone calls him that name. Ever since he can remember, he has been stuck with the title of the existence abandoned by the gods. Just because he lacks this energy, he ended up cast aside and treated like a defective outcast with no place in the world. He knows he is weak, especially when they mock him for not even being able to summon a single shikigami. In gym class, the girls even complain to the teacher that they do not want to pair up with him. Suddenly, his desk is kicked with extreme force right inside the classroom. A group of bullies approaches him, saying it is time for him to learn his place. With a nasty smirk, the leader tells the rest to have a little fun with him today as well. Haruto realizes that these chances to be humiliated never seem to end in his daily routine. One of the bullies lands a heavy kick straight to Haruto's stomach. The hit is so violent that it blasts the boy backward right onto a trash container. The attackers celebrate the hit like they scored a strike and racked up 20 points. Haruto writhes in pain on the ground while listening to the bullies laughing and talking outside. The gray-haired boy tells Haruto to get up right now because they are only halfway through their fun. However, lying there on the ground, Haruto thinks to himself that he has already hit his absolute limit. The gray-haired bully goes to complain to the leader, warning that Haruto is ignoring orders. The group leader, Hibiki, looks irritated and asks what is going on after he gave a clear warning. Hibiki steps on Haruto's head and says that today he will be treated like a soccer ball. He presses down on the boy, asking if he is trying to make him look like a liar, while Haruto stammers trying to explain himself. Out of nowhere, a flaming sword appears in the bully's hand, who ironically claims that the situation is far too cruel. The attacker claims that he just wants his friends to enjoy a comfortable school life. The other guys comment that Hibiki is crazy, and that he has even messed around with a boss from the underworld. Haruto screams in desperate pain as his hand is burned by the attacker's scorching blade. Pretending to feel pity, Hibiki asks if he needs to burn his other hand too for him to obey. Completely broken by the pain, Haruto surrenders to the humiliation and agrees to be the group's kicking ball. Left all alone in the trash, the boy asks himself in tears why these things always happen to him. He cries in anger for having to go through such intense suffering without ever doing anything wrong. A school staff member finally shows up and shouts, asking what on earth is going on over there. The bullies decide to clear out, and Hibiki takes the chance to ask if tonight's preparations are ready. The man sighs in annoyance at the repetitive mess and calls out Haruto's name. He blames the boy himself, saying he does nothing but bring trouble to the school. As he cleans up all the mess, Haruto laments that in the end, the blame always falls squarely on him. At that moment, he realizes with complete clarity that he has absolutely zero allies in this world. He confesses to himself that he gave up asking anyone for help a long time ago. The news broadcast warns that a massive demonic abyss recently opened up in a nearby district. The report explains that a colossal demon was spotted, but the Sword Emperor resolved everything in a flash. Rika watches the video super excited and talks to her dad about how incredible the Sword Emperor is. She says with total enthusiasm that she also wants to become a demon slayer to protect everyone. Her dad supports her, but notices the boy from earlier walking a bit further behind them. Haruto watches the two with sadness, deeply wishing he had spiritual energy just like them. Suddenly, a loud noise coming from an alley catches Haruto's attention, followed by a terrified scream. Rika's dad is brutally attacked and slashed by a man armed with a flaming sword. The masked kidnappers forcibly grab the little girl, telling her to shut her mouth as they throw her into a van. Haruto is completely stunned as he recognizes the criminal's voice and the flaming sword they used. The girl's father collapses onto the ground severely injured, losing a massive amount of blood from the deep wound. Right then, the MC remembers that terrible flaming manifestation blade Hibiki was using. The criminal's van speeds off, fleeing the crime scene in a hurry. Desperate over the situation, Haruto shouts, begging the kidnappers to wait. Panic overwhelms him as he realizes he just witnessed a kidnapping right before his eyes. He notices that he is the sole witness there and tries to convince himself that this is none of his business. However, looking at the wounded father begging for help, his heart aches with anguish. He bitterly asks himself why he always has to face such cruel and painful moments. Unable to simply look the other way, he starts running after the vehicle with every ounce of strength he has. He dials emergency services to report what happened, knowing that a weak guy like him cannot do much on his own. The van eventually pulls over at an abandoned, pitch-black construction site in the middle of the night. Exhausted and gasping for air, Haruto manages to catch up to the location, thankful that they stopped nearby. He hides behind a metal pillar as he hears the sound of the van doors opening. Hibiki's two henchmen take off their masks, complaining about the unbearable heat inside upon seeing their faces. The boy confirms that the mastermind behind all of this truly is Hibiki. The group leader mentions he is going to make a quick call and orders the others to guard the little girl. Haruto figures that Rika must be trapped in one of the shipping containers and fears the villains will run away before the police show up with no time to waste. He decides he has to take matters into his own hands before it is too late. The boy picks up a heavy rock from the ground and smashes the rear window of the vehicle with all his strength. The van's alarm starts blaring frantically, immediately catching the criminal's attention. The kidnappers rush toward the noise to check what caused all that commotion. Taking advantage of the distraction, Haruto sneaks inside and signals for the hostage to keep quiet. He finds Rika tied up with her mouth covered, lying on the floor of the container. Haruto tries to calm her down quickly, telling her that he came to save her once and for all. As he unties her ropes, he asks if she can walk and suggests escaping while the guys are distracted, crying with emotion. The little girl thanks Haruto immensely for coming to rescue her. Haruto is stunned and speechless as he feels her small hands clutching tightly onto his jacket. He experiences a brand new feeling, realizing that for the first time in his entire life, someone truly thanked him. However, right when he was feeling happy for helping out, one of the bullies appears out of nowhere. He takes a devastating punch straight to the face that throws him violently onto the ground. Hibiki steps out laughing and mocks the boy, saying he was surprised to see that kicking ball roll all the way here. The attackers begin beating him mercilessly, saying a hero cannot save anyone while getting trashed like this. They tie Haruto's arms up high and start using him as a punching bag with wooden clubs. As the criminals laugh hysterically, Haruto suffers in immense agony, barely able to breathe from the pain of the beating. Unable to take it anymore, the boy begins to desperately beg anyone for help. The bully laughs out loud at his misery, telling him that no one is coming to save him and calling him a useless punching bag. Even covered in blood, Haruto smiles, thinking that for a useless guy like him, buying this much time was a pretty good job. Suddenly, an intimidating man in a gray suit enters the area. Praising Hibiki's efficiency, Hibiki bows respectfully, telling the underworld underboss that he simply followed orders right away. The underboss grabs Rika by the chin and remarks that a newly awakened kid is the perfect asset for brainwashing. He goes on to say they can sell her for a fortune to collectors or use her as valuable spiritual raw material. The man in the suit notices Haruto hanging there and asks with disdain who that bloody kid is supposed to be. Hibiki explains that the boy witnessed the kidnapping, but the underboss complains that he is being soft and orders him to finish him off already. Hibiki feigns regret over the situation and draws his flaming blade to deliver the final blow. Haruto tries pulling at his ropes in vain, panicked as he realizes the police still have not arrived to help. He realizes that if he stays still doing nothing, they will take his life and carry the little girl away forever. With fury in his eyes, the boy screams with all his strength, demanding that they let the girl go. Right now, Hibiki simply replies that a punching ball should not speak and plunges the sword straight into Haruto's chest. The boy spits blood and widens his eyes as he feels the sharp blade cold-bloodedly pierce his chest. Fading fast, he deeply regrets in his final breaths that he was unable to save the little girl's life. Suddenly, a pair of gigantic purple eyes appears in the darkness of his mind. Commenting that contact was finally made, Haruto wakes up lying on the ground of a mysterious place surrounded by countless swords stuck in the earth. Completely confused, he stands up and tries to remember the moment he was just stabbed in reality. He looks down at his own chest in shock, realizing there is no wound or blood anywhere on his body. A mysterious voice explains that this is his mental world and asks who he thinks is standing there. The voice continues, stating that only at the brink of destruction was he finally able to look inward. Revealed before him is a colossal stone creature with a glowing eye, stating that he is right in front of him. Haruto backs away terrified, unable to believe the sheer size of that monstrous creature before him. The entity introduces himself as Magatsukami, the god of calamity, an existence cast aside even by the gods themselves. Haruto is intrigued, wondering how a god of calamity with such a terrifying look could grant a special blade. The god of calamity offers Haruto a deal, promising to grant exactly one single wish. The entity warns that the moment he makes the request, Haruto will have to sacrifice absolutely everything to fulfill his objective. The boy is confused and scared, not fully understanding what that entity is truly proposing. The creature asks if he is going to reject the bargain, warning that if he does, his existence in the real world simply ends right here. The giant demands that he offer his own life as payment and make a wish worth fulfilling right away. Despite sensing a terrifyingly sinister aura, Haruto feels absolute certainty that this god can indeed grant any wish he almost asks to save the little girl's life, but realizes that would not solve the core issue of his weakness. He changes his mind instantly, realizing what he truly wants from the bottom of his heart. At that moment, he screams, asking for absolute power, so that even as a nobody, he can protect everyone he wishes to save. The god of calamity is surprised to see that Haruto is willing to give up his own life just for the sake of others. The MC immediately denies it bluntly, making it clear that his intentions are not that noble. He explains that up until now, he lived as if he were dead inside, just drifting through the world without any purpose. But everything changed when, for the first time in his life, someone needed him and spoke genuine words of gratitude to him. Haruto recalls that moment, realizing it was the first time he ever felt truly alive. With determination burning in his eyes, he states he will gladly surrender his life if he can experience that feeling once more. He raises his fist and demands absolute power from the god, enough to slice through and overcome any obstacle in his path. The entity praises the young man's massive ego and accepts the wish, reminding him that a divine transaction requires equal exchange. The god of calamity begins unleashing his 10 grand and formidable hidden powers onto the youth. He declares that he is bestowing the 10 claws of the god of calamity directly upon Haruto. With the power obtained at the cost of his own life, the god commands the youth to use it to his heart's content. Back in reality, the kidnappers get ready to leave and take the captive girl with them, but the underworld underboss suddenly stops and looks back, completely stunned by what he sees in the night sky. A massive red moon of revelation emerges in a grand display. This rare phenomenon is the anomaly that takes place worldwide whenever gods grant power to a human. It is a monumental event that bends the very laws of reality around it. Normally, this divine blessing brings immense joy and wonder to all who witness it. But this time, an eerie red sword appears plunged into the ground, radiating a dark and ominous aura. The form of each divine revelation usually varies completely, depending on a few key factors. It all depends on the rank of the god bestowing the power, leaving Hibiki and his thugs panicked and clueless. With his hair now turned completely white, Haruto walks calmly while wielding his new red sword. With an extremely intimidating glare, he cold-bloodedly orders them to get their hands off the girl. The kidnappers are in total shock, saying it is impossible since the kid should be gone after that attack. Haruto keeps pressing forward with steady steps, holding the sword firmly in his right hand. Hibiki stares at the boy in shock upon noticing that he actually managed to awaken a manifestation blade. The underboss orders Hibiki to stop hesitating and get rid of that trash already, since they only need the package. Haruto repeats the warning once more, demanding they take their hands off Rika. Right this second, Hibiki leaps into the attack, mocking the youth and saying, "Amateurs always get arrogant when they get a weapon." He brings down his fire sword, shouting for Haruto to regret everything in the afterlife. Even facing the flaming strike heading straight for him, Haruto remains composed with a locked-in focus. In a fraction of a second, Haruto delivers a sword strike that cuts the bully's attack right in half. Hibiki retreats in utter panic as he realizes his own flame blade was effortlessly snapped in two. The sheer force of the impact is so brutal that it slams Hibiki directly into the ground, making the other thugs tremble. He screams in desperation as he feels the immense pressure of the boy's overwhelming power. Haruto's attack rips through the terrain, destroying part of the abandoned construction site structure. On that exact day, amidst the chaos of the night, the young man finally obtained the power he desired so badly. He reflects that even as a complete nobody ignored by everyone, he managed to rewrite his destiny. He now holds the perfect blade to cut through any chain binding him to his tragic past. Meanwhile, someone is frantically shouting into the phone, asking if the Emperor understands the severity of the situation. Kaname Akuda watches everything calmly while eating his ramen at a street stall at night. The person on the phone shouts in outrage, realizing the leader is casually eating during such a critical moment. The Sword Emperor tells the person to calm down, while they yell back that ramen shouldn't be his priority. He thanks the cook for the delicious meal, pays the stall owner, and begins walking casually down the street. He reflects that no matter the type of divine revelation, whoever wields the blade is always guided by their own human ego. And he concludes that judging whether this ego is good or evil is precisely his grand duty as the Sword Emperor. The massive revelation rift remains open in the sky above the city, drawing everyone's gaze. A crowd of onlookers gathers on the streets to record and take pictures of that mysterious divine event. After all, no matter what anomaly shifts the world, in the end, it is human desire that truly moves the sword. He repeats to himself with a confident grin that his main role is to decide the fate of that new warrior. The scene then cuts, revealing the official start of this exciting new journey packed with danger. Haruto holds Rika in his arms, and his new purple mascot mentions that she simply passed out due to the aura of the 10 claws. The mascot mocks Haruto, noticing he has a look of relief far greater than the person who was actually rescued. Looking at the defeated criminals on the ground, the MC can barely believe that he was the one who caused all that. The tiny creature warns that he fulfilled his end of the bargain, and now it is Haruto's turn to work toward his objective. The mascot begins to reveal that his true and mysterious main objective is... Haruto cannot hear clearly, and wonders if the spiritual connection between them is far too weak. The voice commands Haruto to listen closely and try to extract the true hidden power contained within that blade. The boy tries calling it back in confusion, not understanding anything about the sword's true power or the connection. He laments to himself that telling him to release the power of a manifestation blade like that does no good. He wonders what he should do, while the injured underworld boss tries to crawl away to escape. The mobster thinks in terror that the power behind the boy's strikes was absurd and way crazier than Hibiki's. Determined to save his own skin, he resolves not to get involved with any of this ever again. Out of nowhere, Kaname Akuda casually shows up on the scene while quietly scrolling on his cell phone. He finds the mobster's record on his screen and lists off the extortion, robbery, assault, and kidnapping charges of that scumbag. The criminal notices the stranger in the hat and tries to charge at him in fear. Kaname dodges effortlessly and remarks that he has already grasped the general situation around here. In the blink of an eye, the mobster's blood splatters through the air after a clean, precise slash from the hero. With the enemy down and totally defeated, Kaname cheerfully announces that doing bad things is strictly forbidden. Haruto watches the scene shocked, thinking for a second that the man's head had flown off from the sheer speed Kaname approaches, and asks if the youth was the one who caused all this destruction, and Haruto confirms while asking who he is. He introduces himself simply as a passing demon slayer and shows his official license on his phone screen. The experienced warrior looks at the huge rift in the ground and praises the incredible shockwave of that strike. He notes that despite the surrounding destruction, the hit merely blew the opponent back without inflicting severe harm. Haruto keeps holding his cursed sword, which radiates a heavy, sinister, reddish smoke. Kaname wonders in surprise if the boy just awakened the weapon and can already unleash that much destructive force. He analyzes the terrifying spiritual energy coming from the blade, combined with that gigantic red revelation from earlier. The man says seriously that a rather malevolent god seems to be dwelling inside that sword. Haruto instantly remembers the terrifying pact he made with the massive stone creature inside his mind. The tiny purple mascot suddenly appears floating and cackles, saying he cannot deny that at all. Kaname agrees, and with a grave tone, warns that he will have to break that evil sword immediately. The MC's eyes go wide in shock at that sudden and intimidating statement from the warrior. Without giving time for an answer, Kaname attacks in the blink of an eye, and Haruto is forced to block the strike with his blade. The clash of the two swords triggers a devastating burst of wind that cracks the nearby concrete walls. Blown backward, Haruto complains angrily that the man attacked him out of nowhere and that he almost lost his life right there. The warrior calmly warns that slayers also bear the crucial duty of protecting world peace. Out of breath, Haruto quickly gets up and assumes his battle stance to defend against further attacks. Kaname admits in surprise that he did not hold back on that attack and compliments the fact that the boy's sword didn't snap on impact. He advises that relying on that kind of evil force is dangerous, asserting that he does not want to hurt the kid. Haruto wonders if the weapon is so dangerous that a demon slayer would act so hostile toward him. He remembers once more that he gained that grand power at the cost of his own life, just to use it freely. The man in the hat orders him to hand over the weapon peacefully, but Haruto flatly and instantly refuses, seeing his resistance. Kaname draws his sword for real and apologizes for having to carry out his duty. The boy grips the hilt of his red blade even tighter, determined not to back down no matter what. Kaname moves at high speed, unleashing rapid strikes while Haruto struggles not to lose his grip on his weapon. Bright sparks fly through the air with every desperate block the youth makes just to survive the onslaught. With extremely fast and precise movements, the experienced warrior corners Haruto at the construction site. Haruto grits his teeth, putting in a monumental effort just to keep up with his opponent's pace. A devastating barrage of lightning-quick slashes is unleashed against the white-haired youth. The force of the strikes is so destructive that it kicks up dust and debris all over the surrounding area. Haruto manages to dodge purely on instinct from a strike that almost hit him dead on. Breathing a sigh of relief, Kaname comes down from above with a new powerful slash that descends like a gleaming lightning bolt toward him. The man praises the boy's sharp reflexes while continuing his assault with golden trails of pure energy. Haruto realizes his opponent is getting faster and faster, feeling that he is reaching his absolute limit. Kaname remarks that he understands the urge to cling to strong power, but warns that this dark force does not suit him. Haruto gets grazed on the cheek, shedding a small drop of blood from the rapid attack. The Sword Emperor adjusts his gleaming weapon and questions what the boy truly wants to achieve with that power. Haruto shouts back that he wants to save people, but Kaname finds the answer admirable yet unreliable. The youth grits his teeth, declaring with total conviction that he is telling the truth. He recalls Rika's rescue and repeats that saving her life made him feel truly alive for the very first time. Kaname counters by saying he was merely intoxicated by power, feeling the high of helping someone for the first time. He asks if harming someone for the first time wouldn't also bring a dangerous thrill or a sense of satisfaction. The warrior warns that the boy could become a slave to power and start wielding the blade without mercy. Haruto braces himself on the shattered ground, preparing to defend against the next devastating blow heading his way. Another thunderous impact occurs, shattering the asphalt ground and kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Kaname explains that he isn't denying who he is and reminds him that it is possible to do good without holding any power. Haruto stays down on the ground, breathing heavily, completely exhausted from pushing himself so hard in battle. In his thoughts, Kaname notes that the boy's last counter was way too skilled for an amateur, which makes him dangerous. He concludes that Haruto is a true double-edged sword who could become either salvation or destruction. The hero decides to end the fight once and for all so as not to prolong the boy's suffering any further. He unleashes a massive, brilliant golden slash that illuminates the entire dark construction site. Feeling an insanely crushing pressure, the youth panics as he realizes the sheer force of that attack. He begins to tremble uncontrollably, feeling a terror that seems even worse than his previous near-death experience. Kaname coldly warns that if he takes a direct hit, he will meet his end, telling him to drop the sword right now. Haruto rejects the warning, thinking that maybe there are people in this world he can only save by using this weapon. with tears in his eyes. The boy screams that giving up on this power right now would be an unforgivable waste. The veteran demon slayer halts his attack out of nowhere, caught off guard by the word used by the youth. A faint smirk appears on the Emperor's face, seemingly taking a real liking to the boy's attitude. He says Haruto can hate him if he wants, blaming himself for failing to convince him with words. Another colossal collision of red and golden energy erupts, splitting the area in half with raw power. The asphalt below them violently implodes from the devastating impact of the two powerful blades. The voice in his mind tells him not to get crushed, reminding him that this sword is actually one of his 10 powers. It explains that the blade holds the incredible ability to cut through absolutely anything the wielder decides to slice. The cutting power of that dark weapon scales infinitely, depending on the amount of energy he pours into it. Unleashing all his rage and determination, Haruto lets out a furious roar as he presses his attack. The clash reaches its peak, cracking the ground to pieces and leaving a massive trail of destruction in the construction site. Determined to overcome any obstacle with his new strength, the youth charges forward with his glowing blade. Suddenly, Haruto leaps into the air with his sword raised high, but ends up completely frozen in shock by what happens next. He drops to his knees on the destroyed ground upon realizing that his precious new weapon was snapped. He panics upon seeing that the hilt of his manifestation sword is broken and missing its main blade. The sword emperor slowly walks over and stands right in front of the terrified boy. He commends the fact that the boy kept holding tightly onto the hilt of the weapon, even though it was completely broken. With a warm smile, the warrior sheathes his sword and says he decided to trust the purity of his heart. Lying on the shattered asphalt, Haruto looks up, totally unable to comprehend the sudden shift in attitude. Kaname uses a green magical energy to heal the youth's injured arm, promising he won't break his weapon anymore. Haruto asks the reason for that sudden change, and the master explains that warriors communicate through their blades. He says he felt the truth behind Haruto's desire to save others in order to give meaning to his own life. The emperor mentions that the last strike allowed him to clearly see the true essence of the boy's soul. He states he has no further reason to confiscate the blade. As long as the youth holds firm to his purpose in his heart, Haruto bows regretfully and desperately apologizes for breaking the experienced warrior's valuable sword. Kaname tells him not to worry, while the boy cries, thinking he ruined the master's very life. The man playfully reveals that the weapon was just a cheap replica, leaving the boy slack-jawed in utter surprise. He warns that he is the only one who trusts him for now, and that Haruto will have to prove his worth to everyone else. The emperor says the boy's main priority right now should be learning to properly control that dangerous broken blade. Kaname offers his help to train him, and smilingly warns that he already knows the perfect place for his training. Kaname says he will recommend Haruto for the entrance exam of a certain academy Haruto gets, completely confused by the sudden offer, and lets out a confused sound. He explains that it is Togoku Academy, the famous gateway for aspiring demon slayers. At that institution, the boy's ultimate goal will be to train hard to become an elite warrior. The master reinforces with a smile that Togoku Academy is the ideal path for him to reach that goal. He makes it clear that he wants to see Haruto studying there to learn how to fight threats. 2 days pass in a flash, and the scene shifts to the entrance of the massive educational institution. Kaname hands over a recommendation letter he wrote in a hurry and warns that the exam is only 2 days away. Holding the paper with trembling hands, Haruto can barely believe he actually made it to the place that is the renowned Togoku National Academy, famous for producing the finest warriors in the world. Looking around, the youth wonders if all those people are also there to take the exam. He anxiously notices that every single candidate there already possesses their own manifestation blade. The boy then looks down at his own dark sword with a broken blade and begins to reflect. He recalls the advice to draw out the true value of his weapon in order to succeed. He notes that the entity hasn't said another word since the pact, but hopes the test will change that. The youth wonders if they will be able to talk again if he manages to get into the academy. He sets his mind with determination, resolving to use that broken blade solely to protect people. Haruto feels he has finally found his purpose in life and decides to give this test everything he's got. Suddenly, Kaname appears behind him, praising his attitude, scaring the absolute life out of the poor boy. The master then remembers to introduce himself formally. Telling the youth to just call him Akuta Haruto, expresses his gratitude for the opportunity, but admits he still hasn't received any detailed explanation about the exam. Akuta wonders if he really forgot to mention it, leaving the boy pretty worried about his memory. The experienced warrior holds up 3 fingers and explains that the selection process consists of 3 tests in total. He details that each test is worth 100 points, and the final score will be the sum of those 3 stages. Haruto panics because he doesn't know how to fight with his weapon, but the master assures him that having courage to win is what matters most. Akuda gives a confident thumbs up, while Haruto keeps thinking his behavior is super suspicious. The audio announcement signals the start of the first test. Asking everyone to head to the room with their admission slips, Akuda tries to calm him down, saying the first phase is just a written test on general knowledge. He wishes the youth good luck and says he is eager to see the path he will forge with his blade. Haruto respectfully agrees and says goodbye to the master to finally go take his first test. Despite his nerves, he tries to reassure himself, remembering that a true slayer trusts in his potential. The boy finds the room for the first stage and repeats to himself that he will give his absolute best on that exam. Since he was always good at studying, he believes his academic dedication will make up for his lack of magic. However, upon looking at the test paper, the MC's eyes go wide in total despair. He panics as he realizes he has zero clue about anything written on that terrifying test. The first question requires explaining complex escape techniques using advanced earth manipulation. With questions about spiritual rituals and astrology against demons, Haruto starts crying in despair. In reality, the general knowledge was geared specifically toward combatants. While Akuda relaxes eating a snack outside, the other candidates chat in relief about the high scores they managed to pull off. Haruto is left completely crushed in the middle of the courtyard, realizing he barely answered anything. Suddenly, a harsh voice gets the boy's attention, asking if he really is Haruto. A guy with a mean look on his face asks what a failure like him is doing at such a prestigious school. He grumbles in irritation, saying the boy only serves to cause terrible trouble wherever he goes. Haruto tries to explain himself, saying he was directly recommended by an official demon slayer. The man yells in fury, unable to buy the story, and demands to see the boy's admission slip immediately. The hostility makes Haruto recall past traumas, leaving him completely frozen in fear. The examiner snatches the document and is surprised to notice that the registration is indeed completely legitimate. However, his expression drastically shifts when he checks the shocking score the youth got on the written exam. He loses it upon seeing that Haruto scored a grand total of 2 points, yelling and asking if he has no sense of shame. The other candidates around start gossiping, recognizing the boy as the outcast rejected by the gods. The man brutally rips the boy's admission slip to shreds, saying a piece of trash without spiritual energy should just leave. He throws the torn pieces onto the ground and shouts that Haruto's presence is an insult to all demon slayers. Next, the man calls the other candidates to head out, leaving Haruto completely broken right there on the ground. In that moment of humiliation, the youth remembers his master saying he was eager to see which path he would forge. He falls to his knees on the cold floor, looking mournfully at the ripped pieces of his admission slip. The scene shifts to the school gymnasium, where the second practical exam is about to begin. The female examiner explains that the second test will measure the aptitude and strength of everyone's manifestation blade. She illustrates the destruction-type combatants, capable of unleashing brutal attacks to slice up their targets. Next, she introduces the support type, which focuses on providing assistance and buffing their allies' abilities. Finally, she presents the healing type, used to treat the wounded during dangerous battles. The examiner instructs everyone to head to the booth that best suits the traits of their divine weapons. She welcomes everyone to the destruction sector, pointing out that this is the division serving directly on the front lines. The girl explains that the task is simple. Just deliver a single clean blow against a massive stone statue. She warns that the statue simulates the durability of an intermediate demon and that weak attacks could injure the wielder themselves. The candidates listen to the warning with total seriousness, eagerly waiting for their turn to strike. Candidate number 104 charges forward in the air, concentrating powerful green energy into his blade. The attack hits the mark, but ends up bouncing right off without causing major damage, leaving the boy landing clumsily. The audience is shocked to see the boy's manifestation sword easily repelled by the rock. The examiner explains that leaving even a scratch is great, awarding 50 points to the youth before calling the next person up. A new contender steps up furiously, powering up his glowing sword with golden lightning and massive energy. He executes a crushing blow against the stone statue, releasing a massive burst of sparks. The examiner is impressed with the result of the strike and grants a respectable score of 65 points. The arrogant examiner praises Sato, celebrating the fact that he is the great prodigy and the ace of his former school. He boasts about his own skill, explaining he used the lightning element to slice through the stone statue. Suddenly, a blue-haired youth casually walks past the statue, which has been cut in an unbelievably clean sweep. The examiner stands completely jaw-dropped before that display of flawless skill and mutters a compliment. She shouts at the top of her lungs that the youth completely destroyed the target, securing a historical maximum score. Everyone present is stunned by the impressive feat, commenting that the guy is on a whole different level. The youth sheathes his ornate sword with extreme calm and precision, acting like it was no big deal. An absolute silence takes over the entire gym as he walks back into the middle of the crowd. With a cold glare, he asks the crowd to keep quiet and focus on their own manifestation blades. The female evaluator feels sorry for whoever has to go after him, since the boy dominated the atmosphere of the gym just by sheathing his weapon. The heavy aura of tension doesn't seem like it will fade anytime soon after that incredible display of power. From high up in the bleachers, a few key figures of the organization observe the selection process unfolding. A blonde man points out that the genius youth is actually the second son of the prestigious and famous Ryudoji family. He bets the heir will definitely secure first place in this year's exam. Praising the high quality of the new students, Akuda simply listens to the compliments with a quiet, mysterious smirk and questions. If that is truly quality, facing his colleague's skepticism, Akuda laughs and says he just wants to make sure everyone is evaluated fairly and without favorites. Meanwhile, the blue-haired youth walks along unmotivated, finding the skill level of the other participants laughably low. Suddenly, Haruto comes sprinting in desperation and crashes hard right into the face of the blue-haired prodigy. Utterly embarrassed, Haruto bows, deeply apologizing and explaining that he ended up running a bit late. Composing himself, the boy looks around confused, noticing that the mood in the gym is strangely silent. He innocently asks if the test is already over, while the heir simply ignores him coldly with his arms crossed. When the examiner announces she is closing the stage due to a lack of contenders, Haruto raises his hand and shouts his registration number. The prodigy youth grumbles in annoyance at the arrival of that loud and clumsy guy at the last minute, but suddenly, he realizes in pure shock that his powerful divine sword reacted to Haruto's presence. The MC trips over his own feet and takes a major spill onto the grass, startling the examiner with his blunder. The blue-haired youth watches in confusion, unable to believe his blade would react to someone so pathetic. Haruto holds out his ripped and taped-up admission slip, politely asking to have his performance evaluated too. The examiner takes the document covered in tape and fixes her gaze on his awful written exam score. The examiner accepts the patched-up slip and tells the youth to step up and attack whenever he is fully ready. The other candidates watch, with disdain, questioning if he is really going to try since he lacks spiritual power. Ignoring everyone's jokes and nasty glares, Haruto takes a deep breath and steps right up in front of the giant statue. He remembers every painful insult he ever received and admits that, given his rough past, those slurs make sense. But even amidst so many humiliations, Haruto resolves not to give up and unleashes a colossal, furious red aura. The sudden surge of that colossal power startles the examiner. While Akuda watches everything with a very satisfied look, he charges forward in the blink of an eye and delivers a devastating slash with his massive dark red blade. Meanwhile, in the outer courtyard, the blue-haired youth receives praise over the phone from his subordinate for acing the test. The subordinate reveals that there is a candidate recommended by the Sword Emperor himself, leaving the heir completely stunned. He hears Haruto's name at the exact moment the giant stone statue crumbles to pieces right behind him. He looks back in panic and notices that the cut made on the rock was raw, lacking any refinement or power control. He finally understands that this complete lack of control was the reason his own divine sword reacted so violently. The heir points in shock at Haruto. Realizing that clumsy boy was the only one capable of causing that destruction, Haruto slowly sheathes his weapon amidst the giant curtain of dust, under the disbelieving eyes of the audience. The silence is broken by the official announcement that the boy managed to completely destroy the target, earning the maximum score of 100 points. He breathes a sigh of relief, remembering his promise to push forward with determination to do what he truly wants with his life. Haruto decides that no insult from others will make him give up, bringing his total selection score to 102 points. The scene highlights the massive damage to the stone statue, proving that a brilliant new raw talent just woke up right there, while the mood heats up in the gym. The scene shifts to the meeting room of the renowned academy's examiners. High-ranking officials closely observe the broadcast screens showing Haruto's incredible performance during the test. One of the leaders remarks in the meeting that the rare gem discovered this year is extremely intriguing and dangerous. Konami smiles with disdain and boasts about finding a true raw talent for the educational institution. However, the blonde examiner in a lab coat crosses his arms and says coldly that he does not agree with him at all. He explains that he noticed an extremely sinister and dark aura radiating directly from the boy's strange, broken blade. The blonde man warns with total gravity that the Sword Emperor brought back a terrible seed that will bring major trouble to the world. Akuda says he expected him to look after the kid, but his colleague counters, saying Haruto will fail before that even happens. With a provocative grin, the legendary master holds out his hand and proposes an interesting bet regarding the youth's fate. He proposes that if Haruto manages to claim first place in the third practical exam, his colleague will be forced to train him. The serious blonde examiner listens to the tempting offer with suspicion and asks what he gets if the emperor loses the bet. Akuda calmly replies that he will grant any wish within his reach as the strongest warrior in the entire world, faced with such a legendary and valuable reward. The blonde examiner immediately accepts the challenge proposed by the master. He explains that the third practical exam will serve to test the true survival essence of a demon slayer. The examiner wants to see with his own eyes if the troubled youth actually holds all the potential Akuda champions so much. The candidates are gathered in a dark and cramped underground room, leaving everyone very confused by the environment. Haruto focuses on recovering from his failing written score and resolves to face any danger ahead to pass the test. Suddenly, a bearded examiner in a brown suit rings a loud bell to get the attention of all the youths present in the room. He grandly announces that the third and final entrance exam is about to officially begin in that location. The official reveals that the main task will be an actual demon hunt lasting a maximum of 3 hours to accumulate points. He points to the metal gates opening up and reveals that the test will take place in a preserve filled with monsters. It is a dense artificial forest that draws dark energies directly from the region's ley lines. The area is controlled to house only wild monsters ranging from the lowest tier up to the terrifying intermediate class. Haruto gets pretty worried, remembering how the intermediate durability statue was insanely hard and tough. The official asks if everyone grabbed the metal ID tag handed out at the entrance of that giant room. He explains that the charm carries the emergency spell that teleports the user to the medical bay if they are defeated. However, he warns that anyone rescued by the spell will receive 0 points on the practical exam, and the rules are on the back of the tag. He reinforces that knowing when to retreat and avoid deadly dangers is also part of the core traits of a good warrior. The man wraps up his explanations, and Haruto gets ready to sprint out and secure his first kill early on. However, the official holds up his hand and halts the youth's immediate start with a very crucial last-minute notice. He explains that starting everyone together would be chaos, allowing only those with 101 points or more to advance in the first wave. With authorization granted, the blue-haired prodigy and other strong candidates sprint fast toward the danger zone. The prodigy Toya Ryudoji leads the overall scoreboard, racking up an impressive 198 total points. The official announces that the next group will start shortly, while Haruto panics knowing he is way down in the rankings. 45 minutes pass, and the boy keeps waiting anxiously for his turn to finally enter the forest. The examiner in the suit tries to kindly reassure Haruto, advising the boy to simply do his best. With the start announcement for the final group, Haruto lets out a roar of determination and dashes fast into the dark woods. The official watches the boy running from afar and silently wonders if someone who almost got a 0 in theory can survive out there. The youth leaps nimbly through the trees, knowing he needs to go deeper into the forest because monsters near the entrance are already hunted out. During his run, he realizes with utter amazement that his body is moving in a super light, agile, and fast manner. He recalls that during his sparring match against Akuda, he was also able to move at an insanely fast pace. He figures that this mysterious power began flowing inside him right after gaining his dangerous manifestation blade. Haruto happily realizes he has finally awakened active spiritual energy and a massive physical buff throughout his entire body. In total ecstasy, with his incredible new speed, he celebrates, asking himself if he just flew through the forest skies. The youth gets emotional over finally being able to see and experience the same world of power everyone else saw from the start. With his senses extremely heightened, he locks his attention on detecting a suspicious movement up ahead among the trees. Suddenly, a monstrous creature lunges from the shadows and attacks Haruto by surprise, making the youth regret dropping his guard. The massive wolf furiously bites the sheath of his sword, and Haruto realizes a direct hit like that could have been lethal. While trying to push the creature away with all his power, the boy notices something strange amidst the danger. He manages to shove the monster off easily and realizes in surprise that the impact was way lighter since it's just a low-level beast. Haruto remembers the crushing weight of Akuta's attack and realizes the strength of that wild monster is nothing in comparison. With extreme agility, the youth executes a swift, precise air slash, slicing the enemy with his legendary broken sword. He lets out a confident grin and declares to himself that low-level confrontation is absolutely nothing. Celebrating the victory, he excitedly realizes he really can fight low-level beings and decides to maintain his combat momentum. Further ahead in the woods, a young girl in a blue kimono notices the number of demons is rising drastically as she pushes forward. A orange-haired girl shouts for her teammate to stop complaining and focus on coordinating their attacks together. She demands that the girl with glasses in her group provide better and more efficient magic support during that dangerous fight. Concentrated and super tense, the girl with glasses channels all her green energy to activate her support blade. Taking advantage of the opening, the orange-haired girl leaps fiercely with her sword to deliver a slash to the monster on the ground. She executes her powerful special earth technique to trap the advancing demons against the group with rocks. However, one of the beasts manages to slip past the stone trap, forcing the teammate to use a purple flame technique. She wipes out the enemy and celebrates, saying that by keeping that flawless group synergy, they'll secure a great score. However, before she can even finish her victory sentence, the girl's arm is brutally severed in a large spray of blood. She looks down in complete shock at her own severe wound as her emergency charm begins to glow intensely. The forced return spell is instantly triggered by the charm, and the injured girl vanishes in a bright flash of blue light. The two remaining girls fall into absolute panic, realizing that could only be the work of a terrifying intermediate demon. The orange-haired girl tries to locate the enemy in the forest, while a lightning-fast creature comes sprinting between her legs. With no time to react, she is grazed by a violent, monstrous claw that erupts brutally from the thick woods. She lets out a terrible scream of pain upon being severely injured in the shoulder, instantly triggering her magical emergency charm. In the blink of an eye, the transport spell activates, and she vanishes from the forest heading straight to the infirmary. The young girl with glasses is left all alone, frozen in terror over not even being able to track the monster's speed. The colossal beast rises right behind her threateningly, making the girl cry as she realizes the sheer scale of the intermediate threat. Out of nowhere, Haruto comes dropping from the sky and slices the terrifying demon into two pieces, saving the poor, scared girl's life. The MC lands with total precision as the pieces of the intermediate beast crash down, defeated on the dirt floor. The girl with glasses looks back completely jaw-dropped and in total shock, seeing the monster spurting blood on the ground. She wonders who this mysterious guy could be and how he managed to take down an intermediate threat with such ease. Seeing the gentle face of the young hero, the girl wonders in surprise if he might be the famous genius from the traditional Ryudoji family. However, to her surprise, Haruto bows frantically and apologizes profusely, thinking he stole her kill by mistake. She instantly discards the idea of him being the Ryudoji heir, but timidly thanks him, admitting she truly was in grave danger. Relieved he didn't mess up, Haruto collapses to his knees on the ground with his hands on the dirt, leaving the girl confused. The guy looks up with a radiant, bright smile, saying she is very welcome, drawing a confused reaction from the youth. Right after, Haruto cheerfully says goodbye and leaps away nimbly through the trees, wishing good luck to both of them on the test. Leaping excitedly through the tree branches, Haruto celebrates with joy for managing to save yet another person out there. He has the brilliant idea to follow the sounds of battle to slay demons, earn points, and receive genuine thanks at the same time. With his new foolproof plan set, the boy advances swiftly toward the nearest sounds of clash. He executes several swift attacks, taking down multiple low-level monsters at once and rescuing other distressed youths. The saved candidates show immense gratitude to the boy, who timidly replies that he just wanted to be useful somehow. He feels extremely euphoric seeing his grand dream of helping people finally coming true. The youth notes he hasn't crossed paths with any intermediate beasts yet and wonders if today is his big lucky day. He decides to stay cautious and focuses on running away immediately if he feels he is facing any massive, deadly danger. Meanwhile, in the middle of a dark clearing, the Air Toya is suddenly surrounded by a massive horde of dangerous monsters. Observing everything from high up on a branch, Haruto gets worried seeing the guy surrounded and prepares to jump down and offer help. He leaps from the treetop, extending his hand to step into the fight and help the young warrior defeat the pack of beasts. However, Toya releases a counterattack of icy blue energy and coldly warns that Haruto is merely getting in the way of his fight. The prodigy executes a devastating wind technique that instantly sweeps and shreds every demon around him all at once. The violent impact of the technique creates a massive shockwave of wind and dust, forcing Haruto to scramble for cover on the ground. Seeing that the guy managed to endure the gust intact, Toya coldly remarks that he seems to be doing pretty well after that hit. The heir points his icy sword right at the boy's face and asks if he is the famous Haruto Kamikiri. He heard about. Haruto gets pretty confused by the sudden questioning and wonders if the prodigy recognized him because of the second test. Without giving time to answer, Toya charges by surprise, delivering a fast and lethal strike that Haruto blocks on pure instinct. The boy gets completely terrified by the sudden aggression and yells out, asking why he is attacking an ally out of nowhere. With an extremely furious glare, the Ryudoji heir declares with hatred that he flat out refuses to accept this situation. He demands that the MC prove if he truly possesses all that power, worthy of receiving the Sword Emperor's recommendation. The young prodigy demands to see with his own eyes all the true hidden strength the boy is keeping inside his body. Haruto tries to calm him down, saying it makes no sense to duel each other now, since the test priority should be hunting demons. Toya mocks his response, asking mockingly if the boy really cares that much about a simple entrance exam. He coldly reveals that something as trivial and meaningless as a school test means absolutely nothing to him. The prodigy backs off with a swift leap and takes an offensive stance, setting up his next fast attack with the wind sword. However, Toya realizes in shock that he backed off purely out of survival instinct, asking himself what he just felt coming from the boy. Haruto lowers his head in fury upon hearing the word meaningless, feeling a massive surge of anger rising inside his chest. The boy remembers that this exam was the first time anyone ever acknowledged him and showed him a worthy path to follow in his rough life. He stares at his opponent with total gravity and firmly states that the test might seem meaningless to the proud heir. However, he declares with extreme determination that this entrance exam is of vital importance to his own future. The boy recalls his entire arduous journey up to this point and decides to fight fiercely to defend his precious lifelong dream. In the meeting room, Akuta laughs mockingly and remarks that Haruto is fascinating for wanting to save others purely out of his own selfishness. The academy examiners keep their eyes glued to the screens, noticing that a violent duel between candidates has started to take shape. The pink-haired female examiner sighs in disappointment, commenting that every year arrogant candidates show up to cause chaos. Another official counters, saying that despite the fights and rivalries, this year's new batch of warriors is genuinely exceptional. She worries, warning that intermediate monsters should be avoided for safety. Fearing the worst if the fight continues, Akuta asks if they should gear up to step in if necessary, and his blonde colleague seriously agrees with taking precautions. Back in the woods, Toya presses Haruto with his sword and warns that the scent of that giant demon's blood will attract more beasts. Haruto locks into combat, raises his massive dark blade with both hands, and delivers a super powerful forward slash against Toya. The prodigy manages to block the violent attack using an icy wind barrier, but gets pushed back by the boy's raw physical power. Right after, he executes a quick counter-slash that grazes Haruto's cheek, leaving the boy breathing heavily. He realizes in distress that his opponent's speed is insane, resembling the frantic pace of his spar against his master. On the flip side, Toya analyzes that Haruto's style is totally amateurish, but is stunned that he survives purely on reaction speed. The heir readies his sword and demands the opponent unleash more power, claiming that weak display cannot be his limit. With a serious and focused glare, he commands the boy to show off his true full potential. Once and for all, he leaps high and delivers a powerful downward slash. Releasing a massive cloud of sparks upon the clash of weapons, Haruto manages to dodge by a hair and yells in annoyance, asking what the heir is trying to drag out of him with all this nagging. In the middle of the duel, a giant horde of terrifying flying demons suddenly appears in the sky right above the MC's head. He quickly drops into a defensive guard with his red, dark weapon, preparing for the new imminent danger coming from above. Haruto desperately asks them to wait, pointing out that a massive horde of monsters is flying right toward them. Toya says he was already expecting this, revealing he lit a special incense specifically designed to lure demons. The boy gets outraged, learning the heir is to blame, saying they need to join forces to survive. Toya ignores the horde and asks who Haruto really is, annoyed that he has been acting entirely on his own up until now. Showing zero fear, the prodigy formally introduces himself once and for all as Toya Ryudoji. Haruto complains that he wasn't asking for his name literally and gets irritated by his rival's over-the-top, dramatic antics. The situation drastically worsens as the sky gets covered in shadows and a giant masked creature emerges on the scene. Even while arguing, the two youths begin slicing up the smaller demons, advancing furiously against them in the clearing. Toya leaps with extreme agility to strike the beasts in midair. While the MC tries to yell for him to be careful, Haruto stops and apprehensively asks if his opponent also just felt a strange and evil vibration in the air. The Ryudoji heir asks what he means by that, but is cut off by a sinister purple smoke rising around them. Toya feels the terrifying pressure of the area, and terrifiedly admits that the situation spiraled completely out of his planned control. He explains that the miasma from eliminated monsters usually lingers in the air and that gathering a large amount at once is dangerous. The prodigy reveals that the buildup of that toxic smoke acts as an irresistible lure for high-tier demons. Haruto finally gets what miasma is, connecting it to that horrible and heavy sensation he is feeling in the environment. Suddenly, a pale and extremely terrifying humanoid creature materializes right before them in the middle of the dark smoke. The evil entity releases a brutal and devastating blast of purple energy that easily blasts both youths away. The terrifying monster floats menacingly, while several black spheres orbit around its slender, pale body. Sensing the massive and crushing magic oppression of the place, Toya instantly realizes what type of creature they are dealing with. Haruto stares at his opponent and, breaking into a cold sweat from nerves, naively concludes that Colossal Beast is an intermediate demon. Toya yells in annoyance, revealing that it is a high-tier class, and warns that the beasts he sliced earlier were the intermediate ones. The heir silently takes the blame for drawing that legendary threat by taking down so many monsters in a short time. He assumes responsibility and coldly orders Haruto not to interfere in the fight. Claiming that creature is his prey, Haruto simply awkwardly agrees in the face of the Ryudoji heir's arrogance and ironically wishes him good luck. Toya plans to face Haruto right after beating the beast, while the MC grumbles, inwardly wishing his rival loses big time. The young prodigy locks his attention on the target ahead, resolved to handle this whole massive mess by himself with his own hands. He stares at the black spheres orbiting the creature and tries to figure out if they work as long-range magic projectiles. The big question for the guy is discovering how fast and durable the elite opponent's strange floating spheres are. The evil entity makes a subtle hand movement and fires its dark projectiles at high speed toward the air. Toya uses his swift special wind technique to charge against the attacks and try to break the pale monster's defense. He delivers a powerful slash against one of the floating spheres, but feels the massive impact of the projectile's physical durability. The force of the collision blows him back into the air, but he manages to recover and position himself to continue the aerial offense. He realizes the spheres are hard as steel, but trusts his insane speed will be enough to overcome them. Seeing that the spheres instantly regenerate after being cut, the guy smiles excitedly for a long duel of endurance. Suddenly, Haruto spots a hidden danger emerging from behind and desperately shouts for the proud heir to look out. With no time to react to the boy's warning, Toya is hit violently on the side of his body by a powerful invisible shockwave. The invisible hit blasts the young prodigy with extreme violence through the air, making him spit blood from the force of the brutal impact. The high-tier creature floats coldly above the dust, flexing total dominance in the middle of that dense forest. Lying on the ground, Toya tries to figure out where the hit came from, realizing in horror that he felt no sound or trace of magic energy. He notices that a strange purple smoke started burning his back and panics without understanding what is happening to his body. Haruto steps up in front of his fallen comrade and uses a devastating slash from his dark sword to block the monster's invisible projectile. The MC assumes a firm combat stance right in front of Toya, protecting his wounded rival against the terrifying elite threat. The brutal impact from Haruto's block rips a massive crack in the dirt floor and clears out all the dust around them. Seeing the outcome of the weapon clash, Toya's eyes go wide in total shock as he deduces it was an invisible sphere. He realizes the visible black spheres were just decoys, and that the elite beast's true lethal projectiles are invisible. However, the guy gets even more shocked, questioning how Haruto was able to react and perfectly block something completely invisible. The scene focuses on Haruto's striking red eyes, revealing he possesses an extraordinary sensory perception far beyond the norm. The boy stands firm in his combat stance, calmly analyzing the area to predict the beast's next lethal move. Suddenly, large circular portals of purple energy start manifesting in the air around their entire battlefield. This is a unique skill that Haruto developed on his own back when he had 0 spiritual energy to his name. To protect himself from all the dangers surrounding him in the past, little Haruto had to learn how to observe. He was always on high alert, analyzing every single threat that showed up to attack him over time. This non-stop observation turned into the daily routine of his life. The attack of a high-tier demon is lethal, and all Haruto can sense coming off it is demise itself. Since he already passed away once in the past, he knows this terrible feeling all too well. And because he faced and overcame that fate again, the youth managed to push himself even further. Going through that extreme trial leveled up Haruto's skills to a whole new dimension. That is why he is now able to clearly sense the approach of demise itself. He feels lethal danger rushing rapidly in his direction. Haruto senses the danger drawing near and prepares to act at that very instant. The guy makes a quick and precise movement with his sword to defend against the attack. The high-tier demon keeps floating in the air, surrounded by its black spheres. The current situation is terrible, no matter what angle the boy tries to analyze it from. If the monster gets away, the other candidates will be in danger, so he decides he won't run and will fight instead. He knows there are things that can only be saved through the strength of his own sword, and with his eyes glowing red, Haruto understands that the time to act is right now. Toya shouts for him not to be ridiculous, since a rookie shouldn't face that, and asks if he can't see the attack. The demon floats threateningly, flexing all its dark power. Toya then stares at his comrade in surprise and asks how he is able to see that. The heir remembers. He hadn't even realized it was a sphere until he took a direct hit from the blow. He gets confused because to him the attack looks like a total blur and wonders how Haruto sees it. Suddenly, a tremor signals the arrival of giant creatures at the scene. Toya curses as he realizes the heavy scent ended up drawing another pack of monsters to the battle. A powerful slash of blue energy sweeps the field to hold off the advancing enemies. Toya activates his dragon technique and warns that he will handle the intermediate level pack by himself. He orders Haruto to stay in charge of keeping an eye on the spheres. Haruto gets caught off guard, but Toya harshly tells his comrade not to make decisions on his own. The noble explains there are ways to fight against the invisible spheres, but Haruto needs to watch them since he is the only one who can see them. Toya charges against the pack, thinking that, knowing the danger of the high-tier monster, Haruto won't do anything reckless. Haruto watches the floating monster and thinks his partner asked him to watch. But the situation demands more. Multiple giant purple spheres are fired all at once in Haruto's direction. The boy readies himself to strike, knowing he is the only one who can see and do something against the projectiles. However, when trying to execute the slash, he feels a heavy physical block. He realizes his sword only cuts what he decides to cut, and without that firm intention, its full power isn't unleashed. Channeling his will, he delivers a powerful slash that rips through the air with red energy, but the high-tier demon keeps summoning even more magic spheres around itself. Resolved, the MC thinks he will simply sweep away everything that crosses his path all at once. He executes a gigantic slash that destroys multiple dark spheres in a single swing. The guy lands on the ground panting and curses due to the sheer fatigue of the battle. He notes he only sees the invisible spheres when they get super close, which forces him to get near to cut them. But he realizes this tactic won't work, since the projectiles multiply far too fast. Haruto starts considering the idea of completely ignoring the spheres and focusing on getting close to the demon. He decides to copy the rapid movement style he saw his mentor use before the boy charges at high speed. Dodging the spheres while sprinting straight toward the monster, he manages to find a perfect opening and leaps high into the air to deliver the final blow. Haruto strikes the top of the creature with every bit of power he has left in the blade. To the guy's surprise, his strike is brutally repelled by the monster's barrier. He realizes too late that there was an invisible sphere protecting the opponent's body. The boy is violently thrown back down to the ground after having his attack blocked. Lying down and severely beaten up, Haruto lets out a groan of pain as he tries to glare at the enemy. Haruto realizes the situation is awful and that his attack won't manage to reach the demon. While battling an intermediate monster, Toya gets spooked seeing his partner get hit and shouts out for him. Haruto stays on his feet, but his head is bleeding, and he is totally weakened after that terrible impact. The guy feels the pain of the hit and realizes he truly got himself into major trouble this time. With his vision blurring, he realizes he is on the verge of completely losing consciousness in the middle of the fight. Haruto feels like he is slipping into darkness and thinks that, just like in the past, this time he is really going to pass away. In his mind, the gigantic entity calls him pathetic for almost losing his life to weak opponents and stopping there again. The entity complains that he remains weak even after receiving the 10 claws technique, but Haruto complains about his attitude. Haruto complains that he vanished without teaching how to use the power, and the voice explains that enemies fall as soon as he decides to cut them. The youth counters, saying the spheres are invisible until they attack, and asks how he is supposed to cut them like that. The creature replies that this happens because he only senses demise when it is already directed right at him. It advises him to keep his focus locked on the enemy to see beyond the obvious during combat. The voice tells him to think about absolutely everything the opponent uses on the field, and that he must treat all those things as if they were blades forged exclusively to take his life. Suddenly, a massive storm of ice or energy spikes erupts in Haruto's mind. Facing all that power, the boy says talking like that makes it sound like everything is super easy. But after thinking for a bit, the platinum-haired youth admits he finally managed to understand the advice the creature tells him to get back to the real battle right away, warning that demise is already super close to him. Back in reality, Haruto suddenly wakes up amidst a heavy purple energy rising around him. Moving insanely fast, the guy starts slicing every single sphere surrounding him with total precision. He takes a deep breath, noticing that he barely escaped losing his life for real in that collision. He understands that what he was feeling before getting hit was the sensation of imminent demise. The boy sets his mind on concentrating even harder on the opponent if he wants to make it out of there alive. He knows he can't let himself get caught by the spheres, and that everything the demon throws is dangerous. Haruto focuses his determination and starts viewing every enemy attack as a malevolent blade. With his red eyes glowing intensely, he readies himself for the final blow that will decide everything. The guy concentrates to accurately capture the demon's energy trail right in front of him. He prepares to unleash all his accumulated strength and end everything in one fell swoop. Using the 10 claws technique, Haruto delivers a devastating slash that completely obliterates the elite demon out of breath. He celebrates making it, leaving Toya completely speechless before such power. As the destroyed spheres dissolve into thin air, Haruto collapses exhausted in the middle of the field lying on the grass. He feels his body extremely heavy and realizes the exhaustion is way worse than he thought right after. The forest loudspeaker announces that the time for the third exam has finally come to an end. The voice warns that forced transport is about to start and commands all candidates to stop fighting immediately. Toya walks over to his fallen comrade and admits he is surprised by the fact that he actually survived. He makes sure to clarify that this doesn't mean he thinks his rival is a talented warrior. Starting to get teleported, Haruto replies with disdain that he doesn't need Toya's approval for anything. In the monitoring room, the evaluators confirm that the defeat of the high-tier demon will be credited solely to Haruto. They explain that, just like in previous years, whoever defeats a target of that rank automatically receives the maximum score. Akuta asks with a smile if he won the bet, but the other evaluator reminds him that the boy's overall score is still low. The Sword Emperor counters, saying they can't fail someone who defeated a monster like that all by himself. He reveals that the principal decided to pass Haruto, and Kusabi accepts that he has to fulfill his promise to the Emperor. Akuta feels relieved he didn't ruin the boy's chances, but Kusabi silently thinks the kid could be a real threat. The scientist mentally resolves that he will take responsibility for eliminating Haruto if he turns into a threat, without losing his smile. Akuta reminds Kusabi that his job is precisely to guide the youth, so that doesn't happen. Kusabi watches Haruto sleeping in the hospital room and sincerely hopes the boy stays on the straight and narrow from here on out. Time passes and beautiful cherry blossoms signal the start of a new term at Togoku Academy. Already wearing the school's official uniform, Haruto shows he is ready to face this new chapter of his life. In the packed main auditorium, the freshman representative steps onto the stage to begin the ceremony's oath. Toya Ryudoji takes the microphone in an imposing manner to welcome the new students to the prestigious academy. Haruto watches the opening ceremony and thinks about how Toya managed to enter the academy as the #1 student. He confesses to himself that up until a month ago, he could never imagine himself studying at such a prestigious place. The guy remembers that everything started when he met Akuta, and now he wants to improve at the academy to help people and be useful. With a serious and focused glare, Haruto sets his life goal to become a true demon slayer. However, out of nowhere, a massive doubt pops up in the MC's mind at that very moment. He gets completely confused trying to remember what exactly a demon slayer does on a daily basis. An imposing man with long hair and a beard watches the new students with a mysterious smile on his face. The students are surprised to see that the man, who is the academy's principal, suddenly appeared on stage holding a sword. Principal Twu begins his speech, praising this year's freshmen for being an excellent group full of limitless potential. He claims to be super excited by what he sees, and, at that exact instant, draws his massive blade with insane speed out of nowhere. The principal uses his weapon's power to transform the entire stage into a cosmic, spatial dimension. The new students look up in absolute wonder and shock at the grand scale of that spiritual magic. Floating in space, Haruto is blown away and wonders if that truly is the power of a manifestation blade. Two states that their duty is to protect peace and hunt demons, highlighting that while the responsibility is immense, their ambitions must be grand. The principal encourages the students to develop that unique potential and keep pushing forward while trusting in themselves. He adds that those who manage to obtain power always have the heavy obligation to make the right choice. As they float, the students start whispering excitedly upon spotting Akuta standing right in the middle of that massive dimension. Haruto locks his gaze on Akuta and wonders if his acquaintance is actually an extremely famous demon slayer. Worldwide, Tuu continues his speech, explaining that it doesn't matter how noble the summoned deity is, or how hard everyone's training was. The leader emphasizes that the value of strength is defined by the reason it is used, telling the freshmen to think deeply about why they want to be warriors. Brandishing his glowing sword, Tuu finishes by saying that finding this personal reason is the first lesson the academy offers them. With a swift movement of his blade, the principal decides to officially kick off the youth's journey at the educational institution. The massive cosmic slash dissolving in the air makes the entire environment quickly start returning to normal. Haruto takes a deep breath and gets pretty scared by how fast the spiritual dimension started vanishing around him. Suddenly, the students find themselves back on the school lawn surrounded by beautiful cherry blossom trees. Akuta appears in front of Haruto with a friendly smile and congratulates him on successfully enrolling in the academy. All around them, the other students cheer in joy, commenting on the tradition of a famous warrior showing up to give the welcome speech. They get even more hysterical upon realizing that this year's special guest is none other than the Sword Emperor himself. Haruto falls into total panic and screams upon discovering that his acquaintance is the legendary Sword Emperor of this era. He remembers that this title belongs to the strongest warrior of all, considered the ultimate symbol of humanity's defenders. The boy stares at the man from afar with his mouth wide open, while the hero simply winks at him casually under the tree. The guy grumbles to himself that Akuta should have told him something that important earlier, though admitting he was kind of slow for not noticing. Later on, the scene focuses on the massive and modern building reserved for the theoretical and practical classes of Class 3, first year inside the classroom. The newcomers keep chatting excitedly about how incredible the Sword Emperor is. Haruto walks through the hallways confused, complaining that the buildings are huge and revealing. He ended up getting lost on his way to class. Kusabi suddenly pops up right behind the MC in a creepy way and harshly orders everyone to get inside and sit down already. The teacher introduces himself as Kusabi, the homeroom teacher for Class 3, and warns he will teach Shikigami manipulation, demanding daily dedication from them. The students start gossiping excitedly upon noticing that the teacher belongs to the renowned family of exorcist priests, the Kusabi family. Some girls comment excitedly about how attractive the teacher is, while Kusabi ignores the comments with a cold silence. He picks up where he left off and explains that the real goal of everyone present inside is to become demon slayers. For that to officially happen, he emphasizes that every single one of them will need to earn a special certification of aptitude. The homeroom teacher reminds them that fighting demons is an extremely dangerous profession that can easily cost them their lives. Kusabi details the subjects like swordsmanship, martial arts, and magic, explaining they must pass the test to receive their certifications. The man adds that these special licenses are completely mandatory for both promotion and graduation for any student. One of the female students in front says everyone already knows that, while Haruto observes quietly and starts getting how things work around there. Kusabi then asks the class to follow him so he can demonstrate in practice the true meaning of earning a certification. The group is led to a large open training field where 5 giant black stone pillars are lined up on the grass. He announces the Shikigami manipulation exam, explaining they must summon and control a creature to destroy the stone pillar ahead. The teacher says this test usually requires months of training, but promises to grant the certification immediately to anyone who passes today. Hearing the offer, several students start laughing confidently, commenting that basic Shikigami manipulation is super easy for them. One of the confident students decides to take the first step, channeling his spiritual energy directly into the charm paper. Right at that moment, a stingray-shaped Shikigami manifests in the air, and the boy smiles confidently, saying he'll be first. With a firm command to attack, he sends his summoned creature flying at high speed straight toward one of the pillars. The Shikigami crashes hard, generating a massive burst of green smoke around the impenetrable stone structure. However, as soon as the smoke clears, everyone sees that the test pillar remained completely intact without a single scratch. The boy stands in disbelief at the failure, while Kusabi calmly warns that they have no time limit or attempt cap. Motivated, the other students start stirring, deciding to try again and taking turns anxiously to take the test. A green-haired guy observes the consecutive failures from afar and thinks to himself that they stand zero chance. He reflects that basic charm manipulation skills would never be enough to pass at such a strict academy. Right then, he notices Haruto staring at the charm paper with an extremely confused and deep expression. He walks over and asks if his classmate isn't going to try, but Haruto timidly confesses he has never created a Shikigami in his life. The guy gets shocked that he doesn't know something so basic that even regular schools teach, making Haruto laugh awkwardly with an awkward smile. The MC builds up courage and politely asks his classmate to teach him how to do the summoning. Caught off guard by the unexpected request, the green-haired youth thinks for a moment and gladly agrees to help him out. Meanwhile, the other students keep sighing in exhaustion, facing the extreme difficulty of breaking the pillars. One of them complains in frustration that not even his spiritual blade can scratch the stone, leaving teacher Kusabi lost in thought. The teacher reflects that a real demon slayer shouldn't rely solely on the raw physical strength of their combat sword. Kusabi thinks that magic arts exist precisely to make up for all the weaknesses and limits a blade has. He mentally emphasizes that mastering this magic art must also meet an extremely high standard of requirement. To set an example, Kusabi summons a majestic giant white tiger that destroys all 5 pillars with a single swift charge. He deactivates the tiger and seriously states that performing something simple like that should come naturally to any of them. The students fall into absolute silence when the teacher asks if they thought just getting into the academy was enough to become heroes. Kusabi warns that only graduates reach the top and tells everyone to face harsh reality to understand how hard they need to work. The teacher adds that they will need to earn 6 certifications to move up a year and advises them to make good use of their time. Kusabi thinks his duty is to crush their illusions right from the start, but suddenly a cheerful shout of celebration catches his attention. Haruto jumps for joy seeing he managed to move his first Shikigami, which is actually just a super weak little pink creature. Kusabi watches the scene and remembers Akuta's request to keep an eye on and take good care of the platinum-haired youth during class. Oblivious to the issues, Haruto gets totally delighted and starts happily playing with his tiny summoned rabbit. He holds the little guy up in the air, smiling, making Kusabi silently lament remembering this boy was recommended by the emperor. The relaxed mood spreads to the class, and another female student smiles as she summons a cute little spiritual pet puppy. Kusabi interrupts the fun, stating harshly that Haruto's ridiculous summoning is totally out of the question. The teacher tells him to go back to studying the basics, annoyed that Haruto's carefree attitude is ruining his serious class. The homeroom teacher wraps up the day's activities, ordering everyone to get organized and actually study for the upcoming theory classes. Later on, Haruto checks out the map on the school bulletin board, thinking he needs to memorize the massive campus before tomorrow's classes. Toya suddenly pops up behind his rival's back and arrogantly asks why he had such an embarrassing performance on the test. The noble complains that the MC is super rude for making such an ugly, unmotivated face. The second he sees him walk up, Haruto counters, reminding him that Toya attacked him out of nowhere in the past, but the heir tells him not to hold a grudge over something so silly. Toya changes the subject and asks if he is also looking at the map for the exact location of the dorm where he will be staying. The platinum-haired boy gets thoughtful and says he really needs to pick a housing spot by the end of the day. Leaving his rival surprised, Toya shouts in disbelief upon learning he still hasn't decided, claiming that figuring out where to live on enrollment day is basic, common decency. Haruto justifies himself, saying he used to sleep in the corner of a cramped storage room and that any place keeping him out of the rain works. The Ryudoji heir sighs and says that if the guy truly aims to be a warrior, he needs to get his life in order first. He points his finger at Haruto's chest and reminds him that, whether he likes it or not, he carries the direct recommendation of the Sword Emperor. Toya turns his back and walks off with his head held high, demanding the MC stop acting so pathetic from now on. Alone, Haruto reflects on the fact that Akuta is the greatest warrior of all, though admitting it still hasn't fully sunk in, hidden behind a nearby wall. The green-haired classmate overhears the entire conversation by chance and gets completely stunned. He realizes that while he was trying to get close to Toya to gain influence, the real treasure was standing right in front of him. The youth is in disbelief, discovering that Haruto is the one holding the valuable official recommendation from the legendary Sword Emperor. He deduces that, by having a referral despite not knowing basic magic, Haruto must possess a massive, out-of-this-world hidden potential. The boy celebrates with a huge grin, thinking that kissing up to Haruto will be his golden ticket to a successful career. Haruto decides the best thing to do first is look for a dorm when he hears someone calling out to him from afar. The green-haired boy who helped him earlier introduces himself super cheerfully as Inari Itsuna. Inari says he figured Haruto would struggle with other stuff and offers to help out. Leaving the MC relieved, Inari suggests they become friends since they are in the same class, and Haruto happily accepts the greeting Haruto celebrates internally for making his first friend, while Inari smiles thinking his first impression was flawless. The platinum-haired guy reveals he was having trouble picking housing, and his classmate replies he doesn't think there are many big differences. Suddenly, Haruto gets a text message and mentions it's from Akuta, leaving Inari completely shocked by their level of intimacy. On the phone screen, the Sword Emperor asks if he has decided yet, and strongly recommends the Tsukumo dormitory. Haruto notes the recommendation, while Inari trembles in shock, confirming that Supreme Hero is texting his classmate directly. The MC decides to go check out the place, and his classmate says with the Emperor's seal of approval, he has to go without fail, deciding to tag along. As they search for the address of the indicated location, the two are caught off guard by a desperate scream coming from the entrance direction. A student comes sprinting past them, crying and screaming in terror, as if fleeing from a terrifying monster. Inari gets confused and scared by the boy's over-the-top reaction, while Haruto tries to make sense of what's happening around there. Right then, a large bottle of booze is slammed down near them, and a harsh voice asks if there are still more students showing up. A tough woman with voluminous red hair stares at them with disdain and grumbles that another skinny guy decided to show his face. Haruto politely asks who she is, and the woman rudely replies that she is the matron in charge of the dormitory. The MC looks at the old brick building and admits he didn't even realize it was the dorm since it was covered in vines. He explains they went there because the housing was recommended by a friend, leaving Inari scared as he realizes the trap they're in. The woman catches onto the situation and asks if he is the boy Akuta had mentioned to her earlier. Inari gets spooked by her calling the legendary warrior by his first name, while the woman just drinks and ignores the boy's surprise. The matron flatly says that for them to get in there, they'll have to put on some fun trick to entertain her. She states she owns the place and that they need to impress her, making Inari think she is just proposing a drunk challenge. The woman sets the bottle down firmly on the ground and gives a serious warning about what will happen if they bring something boring. She smiles intimidatingly and promises she'll break at least one of their bones, making it crystal clear that this is no joke. To prove she means business, the matron crushes a wooden crate using the force of just one of her hands. Haruto concludes that this was why the other boy ran away. While Inari panics, thinking the woman is completely insane, Inari quietly suggests they turn around and run for it, but Haruto gets thoughtful analyzing the situation. The platinum-haired guy trusts that if Akuta suggested the place, it must be worth it, and jokes that the school infirmary easily fixes a broken bone. Haruto excitedly tells them to accept the test, leaving Inari in panic as he yells that a broken bone isn't something so simple. Paying no mind to the argument, the woman points at Inari and warns she'll start by testing the green-haired boy first. She cracks her knuckles threateningly and asks if he's going to start already, leaving the boy cornered and shaking in fear. With no choice, Inari angrily asks Haruto not to blame him if things go wrong and starts concentrating his spiritual energy to act. He assumes an insanely fast posture and begins chopping up a cabbage in an absurdly professional way on the kitchen cutting board. Wearing an apron and a chef's hat, the boy handles the pans on the stove with extreme mastery like an elite chef. The youth presents marvelous feast packed with meats and seafood, proudly announcing that the dishes are served. The matron tries one of the appetizers in silence with her chopsticks, coldly analyzing the flavor of all that food, Inari says, breaking into a cold sweat, that if it's about making top-tier snacks to go with drinks, he can cook all day long. The woman cracks a satisfied smile and announces that he passed the test, making the green-haired boy celebrate hard in relief. She then zeroes in on Haruto and asks what he can do, and the boy timidly replies that his only real skill is cutting stuff. The matron challenges him to show what he can do with a sword and walks intimidatingly toward the boy under the trees with extreme agility. She takes an impressive leap and lands right on top of one of the highest branches of the cherry blossom tree. She holds a single glowing petal imbued with magic and warns that his entrance test starts right now. The woman explains she will drop the magic petal and that if Haruto manages to slice it in half before it touches the ground, he passes. Inari complains that the test with a single falling petal is way too hard, but Haruto draws his blade and decides it's worth a shot. The matron drops the tiny glowing object into the air and tells the MC to get ready for the target's rapid fall. The scene recalls the moment Akuta privately asked her to take good care of the platinum-haired youth when he got there. She thinks about the fact that the legendary warrior personally asked her a favor like that for a total academy rookie. The woman smiles mischievously, thinking that this special request only makes her want to make things harder for the guy. She watches closely from high up on the branch as the magic petal falls mixed in among hundreds of other regular cherry leaves. The matron thinks that if the boy wants to use cutting skills as his main ace, he must be able to handle a test of this level. Haruto grips his broken sword with absolute focus, gearing up to slice the tiny falling target. With a movement imperceptible to regular eyes, the youth delivers an insanely fast air slash. The MC happily celebrates making it, leaving Inari completely stunned since he saw absolutely nothing. Haruto holds out his hand and shows the halved petal, and Inari stands jaw-dropped, realizing he actually sliced and caught the object. The guy mentions the other half must be nearby. While the matron watches the whole scene in complete silence, the woman remembers that the petal was fully shielded by a thick layer of spiritual energy. She concludes that to slice it without losing sight of the target, the boy must possess extraordinary visual capability. On top of that, what impresses her most is the fact that he made the cut without scratching any other falling petal around it. The matron smiles and says he passed, thinking that the way he overcomes ridiculous challenges heavily resembles Akuta's student days. She reflects that wild days certainly await those youths, while Haruto excitedly shows the petal to his classmate. In his dream, Haruto hears a voice telling him to extract the true power of his weapon already, waking up suddenly to the sound of the alarm in the morning. The sun rises, illuminating the front of Tsukumo Dormitory, marking the official start of the new student's first day of school. Still wearing his pajamas, Haruto opens his bedroom door and steps into the hallway looking a bit confused. He finds Inari helping out in the kitchen early on, and the matron greets the boy, wishing him a good morning. Haruto asks why his friend is wearing an apron, and Inari says the look suits him while the landlady laughs. The platinum-haired boy asks about the other residents, and the woman explains they are probably still asleep, telling them to eat first. The two thank her for the delicious food cooked with lots of care for their breakfast. Haruto happily mentions that eating with company is awesome, while Inari slumps exhausted on the table from waking up so early to help. The MC gets his classmate's attention and mentions he'd like to ask him an important question. He asks if Inari knows how to speak with the entity living inside a manifestation blade. Leaving his friend confused, Haruto explains he managed to talk to his weapon spirit inside his own mental world, right when he received it. The guy says the entity vanished after claiming the connection was weak, and Inari comments surprised that talking to the sword god right at the start is rare. His classmate explains there are several necessary stages before a warrior can communicate freely with their spiritual weapon. He mentions there is a teacher at the academy obsessed with swords who would definitely love to help Haruto understand the topic better. Inari suggests they look for this teacher right after classes end, and Haruto happily agrees with his friend's idea. The scene shifts to the academy's morning session, kicking off the grueling practical physical conditioning class for the students. The students run and climb obstacles under massive physical pressure, with Inari struggling big time to keep up with the pace. The pink-haired female teacher yells for them not to give up, reminding them that a demon hunter's stamina must be far beyond the ordinary. Inari complains tiredly that talk is cheap, while trying to stay firm on the obstacles, even though he's completely wiped out. The boy grumbles that he's using all his spiritual energy just to endure the weight of the magic bracelets on his body. Haruto crosses the finish line in first place with total ease, showing a physical performance far superior to the other students. The female instructor evaluates that his time was good, but warns he is wasting far too many movements unnecessarily while running. She explains that the guy relies too heavily on spiritual energy to cover up his mistakes, warning he'll stop evolving if he keeps going like this. Haruto lets out a soft smirk at the advice, leaving the strict, pink-haired female instructor somewhat intrigued. He smilingly confesses he is happy because, for the first time in his life, he is being treated like a regular student at a school. The teacher's eyes soften, and she says she knows nobody ever taught him before, encouraging him to learn everything he can at the academy. Right after, she drops back into her severe tone and orders 10 more laps on the track for the rest of the lagging students, triggering screams of despair. In the afternoon period, the class gathers in another building of the institution to begin the theory class on blade studies. The eccentric Professor Urushizaya starts explaining on the blackboard that the study of swords works like a life philosophy. Inari almost falls asleep at his desk, thinking about the theory of gods and spirits while fighting bravely against the heavy afternoon drowsiness. The youth complains that the monotonous theory class right after grueling military-style physical training is making his eyelids feel heavy as lead. Looking to the side, he gets shocked seeing Haruto paying attention to everything with his eyes shining with excitement and curiosity. Haruto emotionally reflects that he is finally part of a world that was always out of his reach while others were already learning. Seeing his roommate's sincere dedication, Inari smiles and thinks the platinum-haired guy will definitely do great at the educational institution. The guy falls asleep at his desk and dreams of forming an unstoppable team alongside Haruto, while the MC stays locked into the chalkboard content. At the end of the period, Haruto quickly stands up and calls out for Professor Urushizaya right at the classroom exit. He asks about the spirits living inside the swords, and the eccentric master suggests they talk about blade gods as they walk. The old teacher turns around excited by the question and exclaims with wide eyes that he finds the subject extremely fascinating and incredible. The professor starts walking fast and asking dozens of questions non-stop, leaving Haruto confused on how to explain his mental experience. Urushizaya excitedly asks about the entity's look and smell, making Inari think the master is way too hype over the conversation. Urushizaya asks if the sword god told Haruto to unleash the true power of the blade, and the youth confirms, leaving the teacher thoughtful. The professor slyly confesses he realized he could take advantage of the situation to satisfy his own curiosity. At the same time, he explains that usually a strong bond lets you speak with the sword god whenever you want, but since Haruto's link is weak, the way to fix it is getting used to the weapon. Urushizaya says he knows the perfect place for that and asks the boys to follow him to a massive academy gymnasium. He presents the Blade Studies training hall, revealing the area has reinforced spiritual barriers to hold up even during certification exams. The teacher points to a wooden dummy and warns that mechanical puppet is the real reason he brought Haruto there. Facing Haruto's doubt, the master explains that it is the Blade Replica Model Number 7, a puppet built using the finest onmyojutsu techniques Urushizaya shows. There is a slot on the puppet's back to insert the manifestation blade and tells Haruto to slide it in already. Haruto agrees and plunges his broken sword directly into the slot located on the mechanical puppet's back. Suddenly, a surging red energy erupts and the MC realizes in terror that his spiritual power is getting drained rapidly. The professor explains to a terrified Inari that the dummy analyzes the absorbed energy to transform into an opponent with the exact same power as the user. With a locked-in look, the master reveals that defeating this opponent generated by the puppet also counts as the official certification exam for the subject. He encourages Haruto to fight the puppet to discover his weapon's true potential, and the guy takes on the challenge pretty tense. Inari anxiously asks if it's really okay to run a test like this so casually, but the master assures him everything is fine since he is the head instructor. The professor highlights that Haruto ranked first in the recent entrance exams, and even took down a high-tier demon during the practical test. Inari falls into total shock and starts deducing that Haruto must be even stronger than Toya Ryudoji himself. Urushizaya claims his strength is plenty for the exam, but whispers that in truth, he just wants to study the manifestation blade, annoying Inari with his obsession. The old man thinks to himself that he is dying to find out the secret hidden inside the weapon, hand-picked by the legendary Sword Emperor. Right then, the teacher asks if Inari isn't curious too, leaving the youth scared, thinking the master caught on to his motives behind the friendship. In his thoughts, the teacher hopes the sleeping deity inside that blade enjoys the mechanical opponent he set up for the battle. Outside, the spiritual barrier is already active to prevent energy leaks, transforming the training gym into a tiny, isolated world. Back at the test, Haruto closely watches a strange black smoke starting to rise from his weapon while it remains stuck to the wooden dummy. A massive pillar of dark energy bursts from the puppet, scaring the platinum-haired guy with the sudden intensity of that mysterious power. The violent impact blows Haruto backward, forcing the boy to slide across the gym floor while trying to hold his combat stance. A dark creature emerges amidst the purple fog, muttering through sharp teeth that the wooden body is fragile, yet still pretty useful. Haruto stands completely baffled and shocked, witnessing the terrifying transformation right before his eyes. The long-haired winged entity completes its spiritual transformation and lets out a disdainful sigh in the middle of all that purple smoke. The professor shouts in awe that the entity analyzed the puppet's technique and possessed it, while Inari panics, not getting what's going on. Haruto senses a crushing, malevolent pressure coming from his opponent, and instantly realizes there are zero doubts about that creature's identity. The boy realizes that the being standing right in front of him is none other than the terrifying god of Calamity dwelling inside his own sword. breaking into a nervous sweat, seeing the imposing silhouette. Inari terrifiedly asks if that haunting creature is what really lives inside Haruto's weapon. The god of Calamity quietly looks around the training gym and whispers that there are people cluttering up their path here. Sensing the imminent danger locked onto them, the professor and Inari instantly drop into high alert and widen their eyes in terror. Without any hesitation, the entity unleashes an insanely fast and powerful green slash straight toward the spectating duo. The devastating strike triggers a massive explosion and obliterates the ground where the two were standing seconds ago. Haruto anxiously watches the giant cloud of dust and debris that formed after the monster's sudden attack. The platinum-haired guy desperately screams Inari's and the teacher's names, who now show up down and knocked out against the wall, smashed by the impact. Haruto glares at his opponent in fury and asks what he just did, but the creature simply rudely tells the boy to shut his mouth. The god of Calamity says Haruto is way too weak and that his plan will fail if the youth keeps ending up on the brink of demise before his goal is met. The opponent declares he will teach the platinum-haired boy how to use true power with his own body, leaving the MC extremely angry and focused. The entity warns Haruto not to get distracted by anything else and starts channeling his energy to kick off the combat training. Suddenly, a giant dark rift rips open the gym floor, forcing the MC to leap backward nimbly to avoid getting hit. The enemy instantly appears behind Haruto and questions how someone challenging an opponent can hesitate and keep looking around. With a swift and ruthless blow, the monster slams the boy into the ground with all his power, carving a crater right in the middle of the training hall. The creature notices the youth isn't holding back effort, and Haruto angrily responds, calling the opponent an idiot while trying to recover on the ground. The evil entity looks at his own wooden hand and remarks that this body is indeed quite convenient for manifesting in the real world. He points out that the physical durability of the puppet is full of flaws, leading Haruto to deduce that the creature will self-destruct if the fight drags on too long. The opponent readies a new attack and taunts the boy, saying he can clearly read all his cowardly thoughts written across his face. The demon makes giant shadow claws erupt from his hands and unleashes multiple devastating slashes throughout the entire hall. Meanwhile, Inari remains lying unconscious near the rubble, with a deep wound on his arm that starts bleeding heavily. The dark being warns Haruto that his next hit will be for real, and that it will strike him dead on at the next chance. Haruto gets extremely furious at the provocation and curses his opponent. While trying to stay firm facing the danger, Haruto yells that his goal is just to help, and tells the monster not to drag innocent people into it. But the god replies that the boy himself put them there. The creature warns he has no time to waste, and that if Haruto doesn't reach him with a slash before the puppet rots, both spectating viewers will pass away. Completely enraged, Haruto charges at high speed toward his opponent, demanding he stop playing with his patience. The youth unleashes a powerful attack, but the blade collides violently against the opponent's makeshift barrier. Haruto gets stunned seeing a magic shield blocking his strike and thinks he just needs to channel even more spiritual energy to overcome it. The entity repels the hit with ease and mocks the platinum-haired guy, saying he is way too slow and that no enemy would wait that long for him to charge energy. The monster fires a powerful dark energy slash and tells Haruto to use his head like a true warrior to find a better way to fight. Haruto manages to dodge the attack and quickly plans to sneak a second strike right behind the impact of that repelled slash. He executes his strategy fast, creating a large blast of dust and impact in the direction the opponent was standing. The opponent analyzes that Haruto's technique is a blade sharpened to the extreme by energy, but points out that the crucial power isn't even coating the sword. The boy realizes nothing there is fragile enough to be cut and reflects that he needs time to charge the required amount of energy. Watching the boy's performance, the entity silently considers if it wouldn't be better to just finish off the boy to force him to awaken for good. Reminded that Inari is his first true friend, Haruto fills with determination and mentally tells the monster to stop talking nonsense. The god of Calamity scoffs, asserting that this kind of cheesy talk only serves to give the enemy more of an edge in a real fight. Haruto angrily yells for the opponent to shut up while locking his entire attention onto the evil creature's rapid movement. The platinum-haired guy throws himself in front of his knocked-out comrades and uses his own sword to block a lethal attack heading their way. The enemy keeps mocking him, saying losing that first friend will leave a massive empty void in the youth's chest, leaving only a lonely life behind. He adds that the regret will be even worse because of Haruto's own weakness, lacking the power to protect him. Haruto gets extremely pissed off, realizing the opponent is playing with him in such a cruel and cowardly way mid-test. However, the guy notices something unusual in that last clash and begins to focus deeply on his own breathing and body posture. The youth surprisingly realizes he managed to slice the enemy attack even without having time to charge almost any of his own spiritual energy. He starts questioning himself intensely about what exactly was different that time that allowed him such efficiency on the strike. The opponent warns that it is only possible to protect someone while they are alive and suggests Haruto shift strategies and start attacking him head-on. Haruto replies he doesn't need advice and charges bravely at the monster, resolved to carve a path by force using all his strength. The boy delivers a direct sword slash against the magical barrier, shielding the wooden demon's body, triggering a deafening metallic sound. However, the opponent repels the hit effortlessly and coldly remarks that Haruto's slash was super light and harmless. The otherworldly being orders the platinum-haired boy to lock in for real on the battle while flexing his sharp claws to strike back. Next, a giant, devastating purple slash rips through the air, splitting the space with impressive destructive potency. The impact hits Haruto dead on and creates a massive cloud of dark dust, wrecking a huge portion of the training arena's stone floor. Haruto tries to hold his ground and confusedly asks himself how the enemy can unleash such powerful slashes effortlessly and with zero cooldown time. He remembers the advice that he was trying to fix his mistakes purely with raw volume of energy, wasting power and capping his evolution. The platinum-haired boy finally gets that he needs to trim down the wasted spiritual energy by focusing strictly on his posture and basic movements. The boy realizes the key to reaching maximum combat efficiency lies in perfectly controlling the flow of power running throughout his entire body. While the MC reflects, the terrifying opponent advances again without giving quarter and hurls another slashing attack in his direction. This time, Haruto dodges the attack with extreme agility and slides fluidly across the destroyed gym floor. The demon gets slightly surprised by the rapid reaction and mutters he'll find out on the next attack if that dodge was pure luck. The creature warns he'll test the youth's skill on the next charge, while the platinum-haired boy gears up, adopting a solid combat stance. The monster charges fiercely, wrecking the floor with shadow claws. But Haruto lets out just a confident breath as he readies for the clash. Leaping lightly over the devastating strike, Haruto understands that the secret wasn't stacking raw spiritual energy to land attacks. He compares the power to stagnant water sitting still, noting that only a strong, continuous waterfall current holds the force to crush rocks. The youth gets that energy must circulate fluidly and concentrate on the exact point of impact, rather than just coating his body like armor. With his eyes blazing with determination, Haruto focuses his mind entirely on controlling the flow of power while coming down on the enemy. He precisely guides his spiritual power through his back, shoulders, and arms, focusing all that force toward his hands. The glowing energy travels through every inch of his skin until reaching the tip of his fingers, which firmly grip the red hilt of his broken sword. With that, a gigantic, razor-sharp spiritual blade projects off Haruto's broken sword, ready to deliver a lethal slash. Sensing the imminent danger, the god of Calamity tries to quickly shield himself by conjuring a triple magic barrier in front of his wooden body. Haruto locks his scarlet eyes intensely on the target and executes his ultimate attack with an unshakable conviction that he will prevail. The destructive claw slash rips through the opponent's 3 defensive barriers all at once, splitting the space with overwhelming power. Haruto's destructive attack completely cuts through the area, breaking the opponent's defenses in one go in a massive cloud of dust. Haruto celebrates mentally, realizing he managed to break that ridiculously tough barrier with just a single, well-concentrated strike. As the wooden dummy crumbles, the god of Calamity explains that focusing power on a specific point is the true foundation of energy refinement. He smirked slightly and said, Haruto finally met the necessary conditions to unlock the true value of his manifestation blade. Haruto looks at his sword and notices in shock that it's glowing intensely and vibrating in a completely different way than before. The god of Calamity grumbles about how high maintenance and demanding his vessel can be, while a mysterious light pulls the boy's mind. Opening his eyes, Haruto realizes he was pulled back into his own mental world, where the giant creature praises him for reaching there on his own. The massive entity rests before him and warns that now he can finally reveal what his true objective is for the guy. He introduces himself as Muten and reveals he came up to the Earth's surface, searching for a specific person who wields a certain manifestation blade. Muten explains he is looking for a man who wields a divine weapon with an extremely clear, translucent ice blade. Super curious about the revelation, Haruto asks the god of Calamity the reason why he's looking for this mysterious warrior. Haruto is horrified to find out he is supposed to eliminate this person, but Muten warns that this man could also end up becoming a major enemy to the youth. The god adds that if Haruto discovers the man's true nature and finds it in himself to forgive him, he won't have to finish him off. Though heavily doubting that'll happen, Haruto accepts at least searching for the mysterious man to fulfill the deal, but sets a crucial condition in exchange for his help. With a serious and firm glare, the boy demands that the god of Calamity never again involve or threaten the people around him in his disputes. Muten accepts the deal and says that for Haruto to protect what is precious to him, he'll need to train hard and reach the proper level of strength. The entity warns that this is the price for getting involved with him, and suddenly Haruto's mind snaps back to the training hall where the dummy lies destroyed. Haruto stays silent for a few moments, looking at the broken wooden pieces on the floor while reflecting on everything he just heard. Right then, Professor Urushizuya suddenly pops up and grabs him from behind, leaving the guy confused with how fast the teacher recovered. The old man smiles and explains that sword gods always want to dialogue, and that arranging this chance for contact is also part of his duty. In his thoughts, the professor is blown away by how easily the entity managed to take total control of the mechanical body during the test. He notes that even the leftover energy is malevolent, and confesses that if it weren't just a training dummy, he would have been forced to draw his own weapon. Haruto lowers his head in guilt and laments to the teacher that he ended up badly hurting Inari, the very first friend he ever made in his life. The master comforts the platinum-haired boy, praising his top-tier performance on the test and assuring him his friend will definitely understand the whole situation. The old man reflects worriedly about the evil shadows lurking around the academy and how unusual Haruto's presence is amidst all these events. With a super serious and composed look, the professor walks quietly through the hall, feeling like something is very wrong and about to happen. The teacher senses the gears of fate have started turning, while Haruto runs worriedly to help Inari, who wakes up doing fine on the floor. He senses a disturbing vibe blanketing the entire continent and has the distinct feeling that something massive has finally started moving. The next day, the scene cuts back to the theory classroom, where one of the academy's teachers begins his explanations in front of the students. With a bandage on his arm, Inari rests his chin on his hand and whispers, asking what ended up happening with Haruto's certification exam. Haruto reveals he passed, but explains the teacher can't officially approve anyone on the very first day. Leaving the result pending until he turns in a report, Inari gets super impressed and comments that the platinum-haired guy basically cleared the hardest subject in the academy on his very first try. Haruto apologizes for dragging his partner into so much trouble, but Inari smiles and tells him not to worry, since that's what friends are for. Feeling a massive relief in his chest, Haruto smiles warmly and thanks his friend with tears of gratitude shining in his eyes. On the flip side, Inari gives a mischievous grin, thinking about how lucky he was to secure Haruto's loyalty, even after passing out early in the fight. The demonology teacher warns the class that the students will gain hands-on experience and that real combat training will kick off tomorrow. He orders everyone to form trios and explains that teammates should be people they would trust with their lives during co-op drills. Inari asks what they'll do to find a third team member, since Haruto admits he doesn't know anyone else besides him in the classroom. While the other students chat and form their teams quickly, the two watch the classroom movement unsure of what to do. Inari anxiously laments that they ended up taking way too long to pick until a young purple-haired girl timidly approaches their desk. The purple-haired girl asks if there is still a spot open in their trio, and Haruto warmly accepts, inviting her to join the group. The group heads to the special training building, where an intermediate demon and several shikigami acting as lower monsters were released. The main objective for each team is to explore the facility, clear out all threats scattered across the floors, and secure the area. The instructor's voice echoes over the loudspeaker authorizing the start of the test, and Team Number 8 finally steps inside the eerie training mansion. Inari finds the co-op training fun, but Funo seriously warns Haruto not to try handling everything alone and end up taking down all the monsters. The platinum-haired guy smirks slightly and agrees, assuring her he knows how to work in a team and that he's counting on Funo's help and skills. Funo gives a friendly smile and thanks the MC for placing his trust in her for such an important school activity. Inari strikes up conversation and asks what her combat specialty is, and she reveals she is an attacker type focused on fire element control. Funo then reveals she is a support specialist and doesn't fight well on her own, making Inari quickly propose that the two stick together and stay protected. Inari then asks if Haruto can take charge of scouting the area ahead, and the platinum-haired guy readily accepts the scout duty Inari poses, arrogantly thinking girls find it awesome when a guy takes the lead, but gets cut off by a panic scream from Funo. Haruto notices enemies starting to pop up and warns his teammates he's going to check the upper floor, leaving the first floor to them. Inari panics over getting left behind, but quickly calms down, thinking it's better if others don't see how insanely good Haruto actually is. Facing several wild Shikigami, Inari decides to clear the ground floor and asks for Funo's backup, who accepts the order looking a bit shaky and scared. He raises his sword infused with flames and shouts for his elemental power to awaken with full force to fight the paper creatures. Inari executes a devastating fire technique called Blazing Sky, incinerating surrounding opponents with a massive heat wave. However, the heat ends up getting way too intense for himself, making the boy yell desperately for Funo to tone down the flame intensity. Funo apologizes for the excess fire and warns that more monsters are coming, deciding to cast a speed boost spell to help him out. With the new speed buff activated, Inari starts flying out of control off the mansion walls without being able to stop his movements. The guy can't control his own body and ends up crashing his head with extreme force against one of the hall's main pillars. While Inari lies defeated by his own momentum, Funo regretfully reflects that giving speed support in indoor spaces might not be the best idea. She apologizes for the mistake and decides to swap strategies, getting ready to provide cover using her own special combat techniques. Funo delivers a super powerful green elemental slash that ends up grazing past Inari while clearing out the remaining monsters on the floor. The boy throws himself onto the floor in total panic, realizing he almost got sliced in half by his own ally's devastating attack. Terrified by the constant danger, Inari tries to crawl away and begs the girl to be more careful with the direction of her techniques. He stares at her suspiciously and mentions in a cold sweat that the way things are going, it almost seems like she's trying to hit him on purpose. Funo stands wrapped in a mysterious and terrifying green wind aura, keeping a quiet, cryptic smile stamped on her face. Deep in her innermost thoughts, she maliciously confesses that faking accidents during the fight is proving way harder than she imagined. Sensing the girl's hidden killer intent, Inari assumes a serious defensive posture and demands to know what she's really planning there. With disdain, Funo confesses she has absolutely zero personal issue with him and admits she doesn't even know or care to find out what his name is. She calmly asks him to just sleep for a few days so that, in tomorrow's training, she can have Haruto all to herself. Without giving time to react, Funo readies her weapon and charges, unleashing a sharp, violent technique against him called Wind Needle. Inari dodges by a hair and panics, noticing the insane level of sick obsession the girl has for Haruto, terrifiedly concluding she's a total lunatic. Even injured and cornered, Inari plants his feet on the stone floor and resolves that he can't keep just running away from that danger. He raises his flaming blade and decides that if she truly revealed herself as a dangerous enemy, his duty is to fight back and defeat her once and for all. Inari explains elemental synergy, highlighting that her wind will only make his fire even stronger and more destructive in combat. The guy trusts his advantage, since she is just a support type, thinking the threat of his fire attack would have broken her fighting spirit. With a confident smile, he tells her to stay quiet, without noticing that several magic water serpents start quietly rising behind him. Suddenly, a colossal wave of water erupts behind Inari and hits him dead on with full force, instantly dousing his flames. The boy ends up slumping face first onto the wet floor, completely soaked and dazed after being blindsided in such a humiliating way by the water strike. Funo reveals that elemental logic dictates water puts out fire and warns that if nature doesn't favor her, she'll compensate using superior onmyo jutsu. On the ground, Inari panics, deducing the girl is actually way stronger using onmyo jutsu arts than with her actual physical sword. With an extremely cold and sadistic glare, Funo raises her weapon over the helpless guy and declares with a dark smile that the fight ended right there. She summons a powerful torrent called Serpent Rain, making the youth scream frantically that using that kind of magic is total cheating. Out of nowhere, a colossal creature comes crashing through the ceiling, breaking everything and landing right in the middle of the training hall, scaring Funo with the impact noise. The massive floor boss monster appears completely defeated and pinned to the ground after Haruto brought the ceiling down on it during the fight. Inari yells out his partner's name in relief, while Funo instantly shifts her expression to hide the attack she was committing against her teammate. Still lying on the wet floor, Inari weakly tries to warn Haruto about the danger and the true hostile nature of that mysterious purple-haired girl. However, Funo clasps her hands together with fake cuteness and cheers glowing with joy for being saved by Haruto. Once again in that training mansion, Haruto gets extremely confused by her comment and starts trying to dig through his memory to place where he had seen those features before. He suddenly remembers the Demon Preserve exam and asks if she happens to be the same timid girl he helped out during the third stage. Funo happily cheers for being remembered, while Haruto laughingly confesses she changed her look so much she was almost impossible to recognize. Blushing a bit, the girl reveals she worked super hard to completely change her appearance just to catch the platinum-haired boy's eye and please him. She timidly asks if she looks pretty with the new style, and the MC, feeling a bit awkward, gently agrees, saying she looks great. Still abandoned and soaked on the floor, Inari gets totally pissed off with the romantic vibe and yells, demanding some attention after almost losing his life. Ignoring the guy, Funo simply deactivates the water barrier and falsely says the Onmyojutsu magic she used ended up dispersing by accident. Funo affectionately steps closer to Haruto and praises him for taking down the big floor boss all by himself, noting she expected nothing less from him. While watching the two talk amicably, Inari silently laments that their trio ended up recruiting a total lunatic of a girl. Funo cheerfully announces that clearing the area is complete and suggests going to turn in the report. While Inari keeps grumbling about her craziness, the scene finishes showing the imposing front of the special training mansion covered in ivy under the dim light of a quiet late afternoon at the academy. Walking down the dorm hallway, Inari complains that the day was extremely exhausting and asks if anything else happened after they split up. He deflects at first, but soon resolves to vent and reveals to Haruto that he had a major issue with their teammate Funo's creepy behavior. Suddenly, Funo herself pops up quietly right behind his shoulder and asks in a terrifying tone what he was saying about her. Inari gets spooked and creeped out, asking what she is doing at Tsukumo dormitory, but the girl calmly reveals she also lives in that housing. Inari terrifiedly thinks that can't be pure coincidence, remembering seeing the girl watching them from afar during the entrance exam. Before the guy can continue his train of thought, Funo quickly covers his mouth with her hand, keeping a fake, gentle smile. She leans right up to his ear and drops a terrifying veiled threat, asking if he knows very well what will happen if he says anything to anyone. Oblivious to all that bizarre and silent tension between the two, Haruto looks at them confused and asks what's wrong with their behavior. Disguising his panic, Inari suggests they trade contact info since they're a group, and Funo happily accepts. Leaving Haruto surprised by the friendly gesture, Haruto happily accepts, and emotionally thinks he never imagined the day he'd exchange contact info with real friends would finally come. Holding his phone with a genuine smile, the platinum-haired boy mentions he's super excited to work as a team with both of them again tomorrow. While the duo exchanges whispers and sparks of pure rivalry in the background, Haruto naively thinks the two have already become great, inseparable friends. The next day, the class gathers in front of a massive abandoned hospital, which will serve as the venue for the practical, low-tier demon extermination mission. Professor Kusabi warns they will face actual real creatures and reveals that, for safety, they invited a professional demon slayer to join them. The master introduces the guest hunter as Mr. Ozuchi, who waves casually and greets the young students with a friendly smile. The reveal triggers a massive commotion among the class students, who instantly recognize the famous name of Yuma Ozuchi and stand totally surprised. Haruto innocently asks if the guest is someone super famous, making Inari stand amazed at his partner's total lack of knowledge about the hunter. Inari explains the man is an elite first-class warrior who held the absolute record for demon slays the previous year, impressing Haruto. At incredible speed, Ozuchi himself pops up right between the duo and modestly says that record really isn't anything to flex about. He explains with a humble smile that having many kills just means he spent all his time fighting weak creatures, so it's no point of pride. As the hunter walks off asking them to keep quiet, Haruto stands amazed by his insane speed, barely managing to catch his rapid movements. Professor Kusabi regains control of the situation, asking all students to pay close attention while he continues explaining the guidelines. Ozuchi whispers on the side to Haruto, praising the boy's sharp reflexes for being the only one able to visually track all his lightning moves. The master proceeds with the technical explanation, warning that each team will receive their combat posts based on the hospital's internal layout. He projects the hospital floor plan and orders all groups to stay in charge of clearing out absolutely any creature that pops up in their designated sectors. Kusabi calls out the guest asking for seriousness, while Ozuchi jokingly says in a laid-back way that whoever is meant to pass away will pass away regardless. The pro-hunter promises to buy a grilled meat feast for the group with the best performance, but Kusabi doesn't think that calms anyone down. Hearing the mention of free food, Haruto starts drooling with hunger instantly, catching Inari's eye over his extreme focus on the prize trio number 8 is sent to the west wing on the upper floors, and the youths encourage each other to give it their all as they walk through the area. However, as soon as they step into the sector, Haruto senses the atmosphere shift drastically and realizes the evil presence inside is getting way stronger. Suddenly, a tiny, dark, low-tier creature pops up floating right above the platinum-haired guy's head, putting the guy on high alert at the appearance. Scared, Haruto asks where the little guy came from, and the tiny rabbit demon replies he smelled a heavy miasma scent and came to check it out up close. The rabbit explains someone is artificially generating a miasma zone outside, leading Haruto to deduce it must be Professor Kusabi's doing. Haruto takes the chance to ask how evil creatures managed to breach the human dimension in the first place, since the area is just a miasma zone. The tiny rabbit demon stares at him with disdain and mocks the boy's ignorance for living so long without knowing that, receiving an annoyed reply from Haruto, it is explained that the miasma constantly produced by human actions and negative feelings acts like a portal drawing demons into our world. The sectors where this toxic, evil gas accumulates in high concentration are called naraka, prime spots for elite monsters to manifest. Cutting off the theory explanation about monsters, the tiny floating rabbit tells the platinum-haired boy to look out one of the hallway windows immediately. Looking out, Haruto sees a giant, glowing magic circle covering the sky and discovers it's a barrier made specifically to contain the miasma. The rabbit details that the barrier manages negative energy density and lures weaker monsters on purpose so they consume the excess toxic gas. Haruto praises Muten's vast knowledge about human defenses, but the creature counters saying all that is pretty obvious just by looking. Meanwhile, the guest hunter appears completely lost in the middle of the hallways, trying to figure out if he's in the west wing or the north wing. Ozuchi hears distant combat screams from students facing a mid-tier creature and decides to head over there to check out the situation up close and help with a movement almost invisible to the naked eye. The pro hunter sprints at high speed toward the spot where the tense fight is taking place. He pops up behind the tired group and warns that acting without thinking is super dangerous, advising them to expand their peripheral vision if they want to survive. Relieved and surprised by the hunter's speed, the students agree with the words of wisdom and thank him by bowing respectfully before him. At the top of the hospital building, the serious Professor Kusabi uses his Onmyo Jutsu techniques to control several small floating messenger. Shikigami Ozuchi pops up beside him on the roof and playfully suggests the master head down to give direct support to the students, instead of just watching from above. With his usual coldness, the teacher replies that a true pro must always maintain a broad view of the entire area and focus strictly on duty. Ozuchi then shifts subjects and asks since when Kusabi started teaching that practical class and what actually happened to the class's former teacher. Kusabi explains that Professor Maneki wasn't feeling well and that the school principal personally asked him to fill in for him that morning. The teacher recalls accepting the substitution with no problem, but got intrigued, questioning the reasons why he was picked for the task. Principal Tuu appears from behind and thinks mysteriously about how he should explain the true reason behind his sudden decision. The principal begins telling that one day he spotted 3 sparrows lined up on the ledge of a window at the institution, leaving Kusabi pretty confused by the story. He explains that weird sight of the birds wouldn't leave his head, but he ended up ignoring the strong gut feeling that something was out of the ordinary. He reveals that on that very same afternoon mission, he ended up losing 3 dear friends who could have been saved if he had paid a little more attention. The principal states that ever since he stayed on high alert for any unusual sign, and that's why he preferred trusting the drill supervision to the most capable person available. Ozuchi understands the principal's concern, who had asked to just laugh off the topic if nothing happened and grab a drink together after work. Ozuchi thinks about the incredible power of those 2 brothers and concludes he can't simply ignore the strong gut feeling coming from the school's experienced principal. Kusabi watches the hospital horizon and seriously highlights that Class 3 already holds enough suspicious and troublesome elements on its own. Ozuchi thinks of Haruto, the youth recommended by Akuta, noting his sword looks dark, but that the boy has good friends and is unlikely to lose his way. The elite hunter starts comparing him to another person from the past, but is quickly cut off by Kusabi's annoyed shout calling his name. Ozuchi asks his colleague not to get worked up and advises Kusabi to focus on the students present, warning that nobody truly knows what the future holds for them. Back in the abandoned hospital floors, Haruto runs down the hallways shouting to warn his group that a mid-tier demon is heading their way. A giant, monstrous red shadow suddenly erupts at the end of the hallway, cornering the student duo who gear up for combat. Inari asks his classmate to work with him on the attack, but Funo counters with disdain and sarcasm, saying he's the one who should try to actually help her. While Inari wants to prove his worth to Haruto, Funo is also determined to show all her strength to gain the platinum-haired boy's ultimate recognition. The two attack the monster fiercely at the same time and angrily yell at each other to stop cluttering their attack movements during the charge. Arriving at the scene, Haruto watches their fury in amazement and naively concludes both must be super hyped to eat the free grilled meat high up on the building under the rain. A mysterious masked man watches the students and celebrates the top quality of the sacrifices he gathered there. Raising his sharp sword toward the skies amidst thunder and lightning, the mysterious man prepares to launch his evil ritual against the academy with a single, powerful vertical slash of his weapon. The intruder completely destroys the giant magical seal that controlled the local protective barrier. Instantly, Kusabi, Ozuchi, and Haruto feel a terrible chill down their spines as they sense the drastic and sinister shift in the area's spiritual energy. Oblivious to the external danger, Inari and Funo guard a door leaking purple smoke and gear up as a duo to attack any enemy that comes out of there. Suddenly, a colossal demon smashes through the wall with extreme violence, and the heavy impact of the destruction ends up blowing Funo away into the rubble. The terrifying multi-eyed monster advances threateningly on the fallen girl, while Inari desperately shouts to check if his ally is okay and can move right in time to prevent a tragedy. Haruto appears at high speed and delivers a precise slash against the monster, saving the cornered teammate's life. The demon backs off injured from the quick strike, and the platinum-haired guy quickly turns to ask if Funo suffered any serious injury during the violent fall. Funo shakes nervously and asks if that creature was also just a mid-tier monster, and Haruto admits he isn't sure about its power level. He warns that being is very different from the ones they faced before, and tells everyone to stay alert. Until Professor Kusabi's voice echoes through the sound system, Kusabi urgently warns that someone destroyed the control barrier and that a massive amount of miasma is invading the site, spiking the threat level. He warns he is sending a support Shikigami to guide each group and orders all students to focus strictly on defending and surviving. Until then, Inari gets totally panicked by the news of real danger. But Funo stays calm and suggests holding out at the spot until the master's rescue arrives. The tiny pet rabbit demon warns that the place was taken over by toxic gas and warns the danger won't be limited to just high-tier monsters. Muton watches the dark mist with his glowing eyes and seriously reveals that a far higher level existence is about to manifest there. The rabbit whispers darkly near Haruto's ear that their worst nightmare is about to happen. Because a special class demon is emerging over the comms, Kusabi repeats the warning that the Naraka levels spike drastically and commands all trios to defend and fall back temporarily. Exhausted, the students ask themselves if they managed to clear the whole floor, but Haruto warns them not to drop their guard since new enemies could pop up anytime. The platinum-haired guy agrees with the defensive strategy and locks his attention onto the hallway while waiting for the paper messengers promised by the teacher. Without any warning, a colossal stone fist smashes through the hallway wall and hurls an extremely violent and destructive punch in their direction. In the middle of the dust and destruction, Funo desperately screams Haruto's name, but Inari warns his classmate to lock her full attention solely on the terrifying enemy. Haruto senses the crushing pressure coming off that muscular creature and worriedly concludes it is indeed a dangerous high-tier demon. Annoyed with the dangerous situation, Funo rudely replies she doesn't need to take orders and locks her sharp gaze directly at the massive monster. As the creature relentlessly advances, a tiny water serpent summoned by Funo flies at high speed straight for the enemy's eyes. Funo executes her serpent rain, thinking that even if it doesn't cause real damage to that high-tier being, the spell will serve to blind it for a few moments. Taking advantage of the opening created by the visual distraction, Inari charges quickly and unleashes his blazing sky attack against the imposing opponent's body. However, Inari's flaming sword collides against the demon's stone shell, and the boy notices in shock how tough the monster's natural armor is. Seeing his comrades struggle, Haruto leaps from above and masterfully executes his claw-slash technique, slicing the creature's stone limb with ease. Haruto celebrates internally, noticing he managed to repeat with perfection the ideal flow of energy he had learned during the previous drill with the dummy. After the tense fight ends, Funo slumps down on her knees on the floor and sighs in relief, seeing the platinum-haired boy came out completely unharmed from that dangerous clash. Inari praises Haruto for taking down a high-tier demon with a single hit, and the MC thanks them, saying their help with Onmyujutsu was essential. Inari feels happy to help and thinks to himself that Haruto is evolving so fast, he'll soon be on a completely unreachable level. Suddenly, a giant foot pops up before the group. Catching the attention of all the students standing nearby, Yuma Ozuchi appears with his spiritual hounds and comments that he seems to have arrived late in the best possible way, making Inari shout his name. Yuma apologizes for the delay, warns they are the last ones missing, and tells everyone to head straight to the rally point facing several distressed students under the rain. Professor Kusabi tells everyone to quiet down so he can explain the situation just once Kusabi seriously reveals that someone destroyed the control barrier on purpose and confirms that many high-tier demons are on site. He warns that the monsters will soon be drawn by their scent, making Funo immediately suggest the group start evacuating right away. But Yuma shows off a stone fragment and warns that, unfortunately, the enemy has zero intention of letting them escape the hospital. Right then, Yuma throws the stone piece toward the exit, and the object gets disintegrated upon colliding against a mysterious purple energy. The hunter explains that a cursed barrier enclosed the Naraka and that it instantly regenerates whenever they try to break it. Inari stands in disbelief, but Kusabi asks for calm and says that even though comms are down, the outside world must have already noticed the anomaly. Yuma agrees and playfully says everyone is safe under Kusabi's protection, making the teacher ask what he plans to do. Ignoring the question, Yuma turns directly to Haruto and asks if the boy really can defeat a high-tier demon. With a confident smile on his face, Yuma orders the platinum-haired guy to stay at the location and help Kusabi defend the position against any threat. Kusabi complains that he can't decide that on his own, but Yuma says he doesn't want to waste useful fighters while there are students trapped on site. The hunter explains that to hold up a giant barrier like that, the spellcaster mandatory needs to be inside the Naraka. He concludes the plan is super simple. Just track down the enemy responsible for all this to take him out once and for all. Kusabi then calls out Haruto's last name, and the youth promptly answers while the other students around watch in silence. The teacher assures he will back up the boy, but makes a point to warn him about the real risk of demise he'll face on this mission. Without hesitating, Haruto firmly states he accepts the challenge to save the lives of all his trapped classmates. Satisfied with the student's quick and unhesitating answer, Kusabi accepts the decision and gears up to kick off his next moves. Kusabi summons two giant protective spiritual creatures, orders the students not to move, and calls Haruto to follow him into combat. Yuma pats Haruto's shoulder and comments that even being a teacher now, he's still a hunter and providing this backup will be good practice. The hunter says goodbye, saying he'll leave the rest in their hands. Getting Haruto's attention one last time before splitting from the group, Yuma recalls the previous rescue and how he was the one who had to define what the rescue priorities would be facing. That crisis, Kusabi walks while releasing his electric energy and admits that in a 1v1 fight, Haruto actually holds the strength to beat a tough monster. Facing new enemies rising under the rain, Kusabi warns he'll sync everything up and orders the youth to focus on just one target at a time. Working in flawless sync, Haruto and the support creatures advance quickly to land precise slashes on the demons. The platinum-haired guy drops from above and lands another clean strike on a monstrous creature's head, shutting down any chance of a counter. He finishes the strike with mastery, making the enemy's dark blood splatter while the monster gets completely sliced by the sharp blade. Other students watching from afar stand shocked, seeing that the boy was able to defeat a high-tier demon without any help. Haruto clarifies he didn't fight alone and acknowledges he received flawless support from the teacher, who managed to predict his every move. Seeing Kusabi's calm composure after taking down the opponents with ease, Haruto realizes the true power level of a pro hunter. Suddenly, a massive discharge of purple energy comes down from the skies and hits the top of the abandoned hospital dead on, scaring everyone. A dark chill runs through Haruto's body, making the youth ask himself in terror what kind of freezing and terrifying feeling that is. Kusabi looks seriously in the direction of the giant dark smoke and mutters to himself that the terrifying creature they feared just emerged right there before them. A giant creature wrapped in purple lightning reveals itself completely as a dangerous special class demon. The monster smiles weirdly while looking over the surface, commenting satisfied that it can smell a ton of spiritual energy. The masked man appears sitting on the roof and asks the demon if it enjoyed the feast of sacrifices he set up especially for it. He explains he gathered several wielders of divine weapons at the abandoned hospital to create the perfect feast for the monsters. Growth. The terrifying demon stares at the mysterious ally and asks if he isn't afraid of ending up getting devoured too for standing so close to it. The masked man counters, saying that if a creature of that level existed right from the start, he wouldn't have had so much work with the plan. Without any prior warning, Yuma appears dropping from high in the skies to land a surprise blow directly against the demon's head. Upon landing, Yuma observes the giant creature and casually mentions that a special class demon really did just manifest right there. The hunter celebrates finding the barrier caster and thinks to himself it would be awesome to manage capturing him alive if possible. Yuma simply ignores the giant monster's presence and walks casually beside it, leaving the massive being completely enraged. Furious over being ignored, the demon throws a violent punch at Yuma's back and screams, telling the hunter not to cross its path without permission. In the blink of an eye, Yuma makes a quick move and severs the monster's entire arm with a single slash without even needing to look back. With a dark and intimidating gaze, Yuma coldly tells his opponent that a mere special class demon should just keep its mouth shut. The demon clutches its severed arm and asks itself in disbelief who that human is. Realizing it won't manage to win if it keeps going like this desperate, the monster decides to swap targets and runs off to devour the other students first to manage boosting its power. Yuma pops up right behind the monster super casually and calmly repeats his warning that the creature should have just stayed quiet. Before he could attack, iron chains suddenly erupt in the air and wrap tightly around Yuma's arm and body, trapped by the mysterious chains. Both Yuma and the special class demon end up dragged down hard toward the ground. Mid-fall, Yuma desperately tries to break free, but realizes he is totally pinned by the massive amount of metal bindings. The hunter realizes his mistake and frustratingly concludes those cursed chains belong directly to the Naraka barrier caster. The caster mocks the hunter for getting in the way of the meal, while the demon asks if it should slice Yuma up to make eating him easier. Unable to defend himself due to the iron bindings, Yuma gets hit dead on by the monster's devastating blow and has his body sliced in two. The hunter's lifeless body parts fall in the rain before the abandoned hospital, leaving a trail of blood floating in the air. The mysterious man watches the scene from high up on the roof and ironically asks if the elite hunter really planned to capture him alive. He flashes his glowing yellow eyes and mockingly asserts that the defeated pro hunter was way too arrogant. Yuma's mutilated pieces keep falling toward the bloody ground, confirming the tragic fate of their powerful ally. The caster turns toward the students and orders the demon to devour them as it pleases, declaring the start of the death feast. With a thunderous impact, the giant demon lands right in front of Haruto, blocking the path and making the stone ground shake, drooling and staring closely at the boy. The special class monster maliciously remarks that Haruto seems to be way more delicious than the others. Sensing the enemy's terrible aura piercing his skin like needles, Haruto trembles, noticing this being's malice is incomparable to anything he's ever seen. The demon suddenly lunges forward, attempting to devour Inari with a violent bite, while Haruto watches from afar, unable to react in time. Acting with extreme speed, Professor Kusabi steps in the way and cuts off the monster's arm with a precise strike of his weapon. The monster roars in pain as it gets wounded by the master's surprise strike, while Kusabi leaps backward to reposition himself next to his tiger. With a serious and imposing look, Kusabi demands to know who gave the demon permission to direct its killer intent toward his students. The demon steps back and worriedly ponders if that teacher is yet another skilled hunter on the same power level as the warrior it faced before Inari shakes uncontrollably, terrified as he realizes he would have been eaten alive if Professor Kusabi hadn't been there to save him. In the nick of time, Kusabi grows suspicious, wondering how a demon of that class managed to bypass Yuma and reach the students without being stopped by his partner. A mysterious voice asks if he's worried about his useless friend, and a bright magical circle suddenly manifests beneath Kusabi's feet. Realizing its teleportation magic, Kusabi shouts for Haruto to hold out until he can make it back, while the platinum-haired boy panics. The other students watch the scene in shock, barely able to believe that the teacher simply vanished right before their eyes. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Haruto tries to maintain his focus, mentally repeating to himself that now is not the time to panic and that he must act. The giant demon lets out a dark laugh and cheers, realizing that the troublesome master who was getting in the way finally vanished from the path. Relieved by the absence of major threats, the special class monster fixes its hungry glare toward the other helpless youths standing there. The creature roars, announcing the time has come to stuff its belly with that feast, but Haruto steps up, brandishing his weapon. With Kusabi out of commission, Haruto firmly concludes he has no other choice but to defeat that dangerous high-tier demon all by himself. Using his absolute claw technique, the platinum-haired boy charges at high speed and delivers an extremely violent slash against the opponent's limb. The creature's muscular arm is severed once again and falls limp onto the rain-soaked ground under the watchful eyes of all the students. While Haruto tries to catch his breath, the demon calmly calls for his attention, acting as if it hadn't taken any damage at all. The demon praises Haruto's dangerous manifestation blade and admits the boy's attack almost managed to reach its neck for a brief second. Haruto stands in shock as he realizes the opponent managed to dodge his ambush attack from such an unfavorable position in so little time. He notes in horror that the arm he had severed with his technique is already regenerating, wondering if physical cuts have no effect here. He analyzes that both with Kusabi and now, the enemy kept its distance, indicating it might be protecting its neck at all costs. With that, the MC prepares a new focus strike, convincing himself that there must be a part of the body the monster cannot regenerate. Haruto dashes fast to attack, but is caught off guard by an extremely fast counterattack from the demon, getting thrown far away. The monster mocks the opponent's combat skill, saying his weapon might be top tier, but its wielder is bottom shelf. Lying on his knees on the wet ground and surrounded by dark smoke, Haruto groans in pain while desperately trying to gather the strength to stand back up. The demon is surprised to see it failed to eliminate him, deducing the boy instinctively concentrated his spiritual energy so he wouldn't pass away. Calling Haruto an insolent brat, the colossal creature slowly walks toward him to deliver the strike that will bring an end to that battle. Haruto roars with effort and unleashes a desperate upward sword/right as the opponent's massive fist comes down toward him. The two charges collide violently in the air under the heavy rain, creating a massive beam of glowing spiritual energy that cuts through the entire combat area. The special class demon is forced to leap backward and realizes with irritation that it was hit once again by the persistent young hunter. The monster notes it wasn't just a spiritual energy defense and concludes Haruto's eyes tracked its punch, deflecting most of the impact, releasing its terrifying purple aura. The demon admits the platinum-haired boy is troublesome and coldly warns it will end his life right now for real. Kusabi falls out of the teleportation portal directly onto the roof of the abandoned hospital and hears the caster's voice mocking his situation. Looking down at the ground and seeing a giant pool of blood spread out, Kusabi stands completely horrified by what might have happened there. Without time to process the shock, Kusabi is surprised by cursed chains that quickly rise to bind his arms. Taking advantage of the teacher's immobilization, the masked caster swings his sword directly at Kusabi to try to eliminate him. Kusabi realizes in shock that the enemy's blade passed right through without causing any injury, as if the attack had phased through the wind. The masked caster advances relentlessly and coldly warns he will spill the teacher's blood on that very roof no matter what. However, a sword out of nowhere blocks the enemy's attack, saving Kusabi and leaving the masked caster completely stunned. The masked enemy steps back a few paces to reposition and lets out a surprised whisper seeing who blocked his lethal strike. Yuma appears fully recovered from his fatal injuries and casually asks if his friend Kusabi is feeling all right. Kusabi awkwardly thanks him for the unexpected rescue, and Yuma simply nods, maintaining his usual confident stance. Details of spiritual wood branches appear wrapped around Yuma's arm, revealing the magical origin of his rapid body regeneration. The caster realizes Yuma's sword carries the wood and regeneration attribute, finding it incredible that he survived after having his body sliced up. Yuma confirms with a smile, explaining it only took him a bit to return to combat because his severed parts ended up falling a bit far away. Worried, Kusabi orders Yuma not to worry about him and return immediately to ensure the safety of all the students. The masked villain blocks the escape using his chains again and ironically asks if they really think he'll just let them walk out. He boasts about the situation and warns the pro hunters that while they're trapped there, the special class demon is having its feast. With a sarcastic grin, the caster mockingly asserts he'll keep both hunters plenty busy until the monster finishes eating. Kusabi gets furious at the villain's obnoxious provocation, but Yuma places a hand on his shoulder to calm him down and stop him from acting on impulse. Yuma asks his partner not to fall for cheap provocations and suggests they join forces to wipe out that enemy in one go. The enemy accepts the challenge and says that if the hunters are super lucky, the students might manage to survive for maybe 30 seconds, Yuma counters, saying he and Kusabi graduated from Togoku Academy, telling the opponent not to underestimate the combat skill of the younger students. Meanwhile, down below, the demon unleashes a frantic barrage of devastating slashes against Haruto, mocking the youth's slow speed. The monster's brutal fist impact completely destroys the asphalt, scaring the other students who watch everything protected by the spiritual tiger. Haruto notes the enemy's physical abilities are superior and desperately thinks his cutting technique will be useless if he can't connect a hit. The platinum-haired boy concludes he'll be defeated soon if he stays on the defensive and focuses on finding a split-second opening to counter. Suddenly, several wind needles hit the demon by surprise, interrupting its approach and drawing its attention in another direction. Right after, a powerful wheel of blazing flames hits the giant monster's back dead on, engulfing its body in heavy fire. Funo and Inari yell to Haruto that they'll provide cover in battle, making the MC call out both his teammates' names. Haruto warns that special class opponent is way too dangerous, but Inari promptly replies that's exactly why they have to fight. Inari says they can't just stand by watching the fight doing nothing, since everyone is part of the same combat squad. He realistically admits he and Funo lack enough power to inflict lethal wounds on the giant monster, but makes an exception. Inari explains they can at least serve as a perfect distraction for the enemy, and Haruto understands and accepts his teammates' plan. Trusting his allies completely, Haruto leaps with determination toward the danger and asks his two friends to help him clear a path. The demon simply ignores the fiery barrier and mocks them, saying those flames won't even slow down the pace of its assault. At that exact moment, Funo activates her Serpent Rain technique, blasting a large volume of water directly against the monster's burning body. The collision between water and fire instantly generates a dense curtain of steam, leaving the demon confused as it loses visibility. Spotting a silhouette through the steam, the monster attacks, calling the attempt foolish, believing it had hit its target with precision. But Haruto pops up by surprise from above and mentally resolves that this is the split-second opening he needed to win. The monster realizes in shock that the body it thought it had sliced and decapitated turned out to be just a pool of water on the ground. Funo flashes a victorious, mocking smile and reveals that the demon attacked only her water clone, which served as decoy for the counter. Taking advantage of the perfect opening, Haruto executes an insanely powerful slash across the opponent's back, using all the strength of his divine sword. While a massive cloud of dust covers the impact site, Funo and Inari watch the scene anxiously, asking themselves if the attack finally worked to everyone's despair. The demon ignores the injury it took and unleashes a crushing blow against Haruto with its other still intact arm. The platinum-haired boy is brutally slammed into the ground by the force of the creature's devastating punch, which lands right after looking totally dominant. Right after the counterattack, the monster's arm that was cut by Haruto finally detaches from the body and crashes down onto the asphalt. Inari gets terrified, noticing the freshly severed limb has already started regenerating before even hitting the ground, questioning what that anomaly is. Seeing the evil face and impressive vital force of that dangerous being, the students realize in panic how monstrous its power is. The monster displays its newly fully reconstructed arm in the blink of an eye, showing an insanely absurd regeneration speed. The demon mentally admits it was caught off guard 3 times in a row by the boys' combined attacks during that clash. Even though it finds taking damage from weak humans humiliating, the demon accepts the fact and releases a massive amount of destructive purple energy. The demon forcefully spits its own severed fist toward Funo, who stands with sword in hand watching the action in surprise. Funo maintains focus so as not to get distracted and tries to calmly swat the object away, deducing it's just a trick to draw her attention. Haruto senses the real danger coming from that bizarre attack and desperately screams for Funo to dodge the projectile as fast as possible mid-air. The monster's severed fist begins glowing intensely in red tones. Right on the verge of exploding in a devastating manner, a colossal detonation of purple energy erupts instantly in the air, creating a destructive shockwave that hits the entire surrounding area. The demon uses its explosive technique and laughingly warns it won't hold back anymore, though it wanted to save that trick for stronger enemies. Funo ends up down on the ground, severely injured and bleeding heavily, while realizing in shock that the demon can detonate parts of its own body. The girl notes the only reason she didn't pass away was because Haruto's warning made her cast a defensive onmyojutsu barrier in time, but the damage was still terrible. Haruto watches terrified while the monster starts ripping off and launching more body parts into the air as if they were homing missiles. Laughing at the young hunter's desperate situation, the creature mockingly warns, it's already sending the next explosive part at them. Haruto notices the severed fist is falling right in his direction and gears up to dodge the impact as fast as possible until noticing something. The platinum-haired boy realizes that if he dodges that explosive projectile, the attack will end up hitting Inari directly right behind him, with no other choice to protect his teammate. Haruto angrily curses and uses his sword to intercept the enemy's explosive fist. An overwhelming blast of purple energy detonates right in front of the platinum-haired boy, completely swallowing him in the destructive glow. Haruto endures the force of the violent explosion that grazes his body. Gritting his teeth in pain while trying to withstand the terrible impact, the demon emerges through the smoke and sarcastically remarks it already knew the boy would act as a shield to protect his useless allies. Another massive detonation occurs right after at the exact same spot, completely wrecking the asphalt floor where the students were fighting. Seeing his teammate get hit by that sequence of terrifying explosions, Inari screams Haruto's name in a moment of pure despair. The demon bursts into laughter and mocks the fragility of human beings, who can't even hold up against a few hits from its explosion technique. Funo watches the smoke clear and mutters in disbelief, refusing to accept that the MC could have been defeated in that tragic manner. Haruto is stretched out on the ground, covered in blood and unable to fight, while Inari anxiously realizes their situation turned hopeless. Panicking, Inari turns to Funo and hurriedly asks if his squadmate holds the ability to cast any healing magic. Funo replies she isn't a healing specialist, but admits she can use a basic spell to help patch up his friend's severe wounds. Inari feels relieved by the answer and begs her to heal Haruto as much as possible, even if it's just enough for him to move around. The green-haired boy steps up front and firmly warns he'll buy time fighting the demon while she carries out the healing. He knows it's crazy, but acknowledges that if Haruto can't return to the fight, every single other student present there will be devoured alive. Since the other students are frozen in fear and he possesses no medical magic, Inari resolves that he himself must be the one to sacrifice as bait, focusing his flames into his sword. Inari shouts that he trusts Funo to heal him fast, knowing full well he won't last long against the monster. Funo displays a serious look amidst the green energy starting to radiate from her hands, and simply replies she got the mission trusted to her down on the asphalt. Haruto tries to move in vain and frustratedly curses upon realizing his body is so wrecked it won't obey any command. Inari tries to taunt the special class monster and boldly says he'll show him that even a combat appetizer shouldn't be slept on. Using his flame mist technique, Inari creates several fiery illusions of himself in the air to confuse the demon's visual perception. However, the monster destroys the copies effortlessly and mocks the technique, stating the boy's tricks are clumsy and far too weak. The demon challenges Inari to stop using cheap illusions and tells the youth to try attacking it with his real body for real if he has the guts. The demon mentally analyzes that, despite being a bad illusion, the boy is blending his real body with the smoke to try to trick its senses wrapped in his own flames. Inari thinks to himself that he should have been perfectly able to dodge that previous explosion if he wanted to. He whispers, upset, realizing the only reason he walked away unharmed from the previous hit was because the platinum-haired guy used his own body to shield him. He remembers they only used to pretend to be friends and calls Haruto an idiot for actually risking his own life just to defend him from demise. Inari swears he will buy time no matter what, mentally begging his partner not to pass away and promising they'll make it out alive. The demon manages to track the real Inari amidst the fake copies and firmly grabs the student's leg, revealing it found the real body. Inari stands horrified seeing he was caught by the monster's severed fist, desperately asking himself how it tracked him so easily. Without giving any chance for defense, the colossal creature delivers a brutal, crushing counterattack against Inari's leg, who screams in agony. Hearing the desperate cry coming from his teammate, Haruto's bloody eyes widen in a mix of total panic and intense pain. Inari collapses onto the wet asphalt and lets out a deafening screech of pure agony, seeing his left leg get brutally crushed by the monster crying in extreme pain. Inari thinks to himself that he regrets trying to play the hero and doing something totally out of character. The demon sadistically explains that the flow of spiritual energy from the illusions gave away the real body, but notes Inari can barely hear it anymore. The special class monster coldly warns it has already decided who will be the first victim of its feast, pointing in Haruto's direction, consumed by rage seeing Inari's pitiful state. Haruto mentally begs for his body to react and move any way it can. Despite the terrible leg injury, Inari gets up using his sword for support and yells that the fight against the appetizer isn't over yet. Gritting his teeth and holding back tears of pain, the brave youth challenges the special demon directly, calling it to keep fighting. The special demon looks down at the boy and remarks how pathetic it is to watch him stand up while shaking entirely from pain and terror. As his blood drips onto the wet asphalt, Inari agrees that acting like that and playing hero really doesn't suit him at all. He remembers Haruto putting his own life on the line to defend him and realizes he could never simply abandon his friend there. Crying from pain and rage, Inari yells with determination that he hasn't stooped so low as to run away and cowardly abandon his partner. While watching her classmates sacrifice, Funo cries silently and focuses her energies on healing Haruto so he can lead the fight. Funo knows that banking all hopes on the platinum-haired boy's recovery is the best and only viable gamble they hold in that situation, gathering the rest of his strength. Inari yells that a once-in-a-lifetime gamble is the exact kind of chance where you have to risk absolutely everything. Effortlessly, the special class monster repels Inari's attack and slams him violently against the asphalt, calling it nonsense. The monster pins the youth down on the stone floor and sadistically remarks it understands his great enthusiasm for wanting to be the first one eaten with its mouth open and drooling with hunger. The cruel demon warns it will grant Inari's wish and give him the privilege of being the appetizer. Watching the terrifying scene from afar, Haruto desperately tries to reach out his arm and mentally begs his wrecked body to move. Right now, despair takes over the youth's mind, and he begins frantically repeating to himself that he needs to move and act way faster. With his red eyes blazing intensely in fury, the young hunter inwardly demands his muscles obey for once. Suddenly, an insanely fast and precise green spiritual slash strikes the demon's maw, cutting off the lethal attack against Inari. Surprised by the force of the sudden impact, the demon is forced to leap backward and drops into a guard stance, trying to understand what happened. Haruto appears standing, holding Inari protectively in his arms, and thanks his teammate for placing his total trust in him. The special class monster stands baffled, noticing the bloody young hunter was able to cover that distance in the blink of an eye. With a dark and focused look, the glowing-eyed, platinum-haired boy promises Inari that he will definitely manage to save him from that situation. Analyzing Haruto's weapon, the demon notices something unusual and wonders if the boy's manifestation blade always held that sinister appearance. Muten, the god of Calamity, watches the situation and mentally explains that the reason Haruto was able to obtain his 10 claws technique was solely due to the intense and true desire the boy held in his heart to protect the important people around him. The youth's rage causes his divine sword to start vibrating intensely, releasing a torrent of colorful energy through the broken blade. Facing that violent wave of intense emotions from the boy, Muten fascinates himself, wondering if the platinum-haired guy finally managed to reach the power of a new claw.